Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. You ever been out to the canyon country of Utah? The real deep stuff? Canyonlands, Dead Horse Point State Park, the San Rafael Swell country? These are the areas where the earth literally terminates at the edge of a cliff, and you're literally standing there with your feet hanging off into the abyss. Silence presses up against your eardrums there. I worked out there as a ranger for 6 years, primarily at night, since that's when the weird stuff occurs, and someone needs to be out there to make sure hikers aren't taking a tumble off a cliff or getting wedged into a slot canyon. Yeah, you see things out there at night, things that will make you question your whole knowledge of the world. This occurred in October, 3 years ago. I was making a routine patrol along the rim trail at Dead Horse Point. It was a couple of minutes past 2 a.m., maybe a little past 2:30. The moon was close to full that evening. It was bright enough that I hardly used my flashlight. The sides of the canyon were glowing a deep red, and the Colorado River looked like a thin cord of silver below. I had my truck parked at the main overlook, engine off, just sitting there with a thermos of coffee and my logbook. It was supposed to be a quiet night. Midweek, October, too cold for most tourists. The only other person I'd seen all night was a geology grad student named Ivy Calder, who had a permit to do some rock sampling along the west rim. I checked her permit around midnight, watched her hike off toward the survey markers with her headlamp bobbing in the dark. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a contrail. You know, those white lines planes leave across the sky. Except it was vertical, perfectly vertical. A thin, white line hanging in the air about half a mile out from the canyon rim, maybe 300 feet above the canyon floor. It wasn't moving, wasn't spreading, just hanging there like someone had drawn a line in the sky with a ruler. I grabbed my binoculars and focused on it. The line was incredibly precise, maybe 2 inches wide from my perspective, perfectly straight. It had this faint luminescence to it like those glow sticks kids use on Halloween, except whiter, cleaner. It didn't cast any light on the canyon walls below it, which struck me as strange. If something's glowing bright enough to see from half a mile away, it should be throwing light on something. I watched it for maybe 5 minutes. Didn't move, didn't fade. I reached for my radio to call it in, but something made me hesitate. What was I going to say? There's a glowing line floating in the canyon? They'd think I'd been drinking. That's when my truck radio crackled to life. "Ranger Salling, you copy?" It was Ivy's voice, but there was something tight in it. Stressed. "Yeah, I copy. You okay out there? I need you to come to marker 73, West Rim. Can you see it from your position?" I scanned the rim with my binoculars. Her headlamp was visible, a small white dot against the darkness. "I see your light. What's wrong?" "Just come here, please, and bring your spotlight." The way she said, "please," made my skin prickle. I started the truck and drove along the rim road, keeping my eyes on that vertical line the whole time. It stayed exactly where it was, perfectly still against the canyon backdrop. When I reached marker 73, Ivy was standing about 10 feet back from the rim edge, her arms wrapped around herself, even though she was wearing a heavy field jacket. Her face was pale in my headlights. I got out with my big spotlight, the kind we use for search and rescue. "What's going on?" She pointed toward the canyon. "Do you see it?" "The line? Yeah, I've been watching it for the last 10 minutes. I was about to call it in when you—" "No," she interrupted. "Not from here. Come closer to the edge." I walked up beside her, and that's when my perspective shifted. From the overlook where I'd been parked, the line had appeared to be hanging in empty space, but from here, from this angle, I could see it was actually touching something. At the base of the line, right where it met the canyon floor, there was a perfect circle of disturbed dust. Not scattered or blown around, but arranged in a perfect ring, maybe 30 feet in diameter. And in the center of that ring, the rocks were glowing. Not bright, but definitely luminous, pulsing with the same white light as the line above. "How long has it been like this?" I asked. "I don't know. I was taking samples about 100 yards south when I saw the light. I came to investigate and found this. That line just appeared while I was watching. It grew from the ground up, like someone was drawing it into the sky." I aimed my spotlight directly at the line. Here's where it gets really strange. The light from my spotlight should have lit it up, made it brighter. Instead, the line seemed to absorb the light. Where my beam hit it, the line actually got darker, like it was drinking in the photons. "Turn it off," Ivy said quickly. "Turn it off." I killed the spotlight. We stood there in the darkness, just the moonlight and that hanging line, and the ring of glowing rocks below. "What do you think it is?" she whispered. Before I could answer, the line moved, not side to side or up and down. It compressed, like someone was pushing the top and bottom together, squeezing it shorter. In the space of maybe 3 seconds, it went from 300 feet long to about 50 feet long, hovering maybe 20 feet above the canyon floor. The glowing ring of rocks pulsed brighter. Ivy grabbed my arm. "We should go back to the truck." She was right. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get away from the rim. We started backing up, not turning our backs on the canyon, just moving slowly backward toward my truck. That's when we heard the sound. It wasn't loud. That's what made it so wrong. Out there in the canyon country at night, you can hear everything. The wind moving through juniper trees, a lizard scratching across sandstone, your own heartbeat. But this sound was underneath all of that. A low hum, right at the edge of human hearing, like the world's biggest tuning fork, vibrating somewhere deep in the earth. The compressed line began to rotate. Slowly at first, then faster, until it was spinning like a propeller blade. As it spun, it left traces in the air, creating what looked like a disk of white light suspended above the canyon floor. "Get the camera from my pack," I told Ivy, not taking my eyes off the disk. "Document this." She fumbled in my truck, pulled out my camera, and started shooting. The flash made me wince. "No flash," I said. "Just ambient light. Sorry, I'm a little freaked out here." "Me too." The disc continued spinning for maybe another 30 seconds, and then it just stopped. Completely stopped, no gradual slowdown. 1 second it was a blur of motion, the next it was motionless. But now instead of a line, there was a solid white rectangle hanging in the air, maybe 6 feet tall and 2 feet wide. It looked like a door. Ivy lowered the camera. "Tell me you're seeing this too." "I'm seeing it." "What do we do?" I didn't have an answer. My training covered bear encounters, lost hikers, medical emergencies, vehicle accidents. Nobody had ever trained me for floating rectangles of light in the middle of the night. The rectangle began to descend. Slowly, smoothly, like it was on an invisible elevator. As it dropped, the ring of glowing rocks on the canyon floor grew brighter and brighter, until the whole area was lit up like someone had turned on stadium lights. "We need to leave," Ivy said, her voice shaking. "Right now. We need to leave right now." She was right, but I couldn't move. I was transfixed, watching this thing descend towards the canyon floor. Part of me knew I should be terrified, should be running for the truck, but another part of me felt calm. Like whatever this was, it wasn't dangerous. It was just there. The rectangle touched down on the canyon floor, right in the center of the glowing ring. The moment it made contact, all the light went out. The rectangle, the glowing rocks, everything. Just gone, like someone had flipped a switch. The canyon was dark again, except for the moonlight. Ivy and I stood there in the silence, breathing hard, staring at the spot where the light had been. "Did that just happen?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, it happened." I checked my watch. It read 2:47 a.m. That couldn't be right. I'd left the overlook at maybe 2:35, driven for a few minutes, talked to Ivy for maybe 5 minutes before we saw the line compress and spin. 10 minutes total, maximum. But my watch said it was 2:47. "What time do you have?" I asked Ivy. She pulled out her phone. 2:51. No, wait, it just changed to 2:52. That's weird. I thought it was earlier than that. Check your photos. Look at the timestamp. She scrolled through the images on my camera. First photo is at 2:43. Last one is 2:44. She looked up at me. "That's impossible. I took at least 20 pictures. Let me see." She handed me the camera. She was right. 23 photos total, all stamped within a 1-minute window. But the content of the photos showed the progression of the line compressing, spinning, forming the disc, becoming the rectangle. That whole sequence had to have taken at least 5 minutes, probably closer to 10. "Time anomaly," Ivy said quietly. "Whatever that thing was, it was messing with time somehow. Or our perception of it," I added. We went back to my truck and sat in the cab with the heater running, neither of us quite ready to process what we'd seen. Ivy pulled out a notebook and started writing everything down while it was fresh. I radioed dispatch, but I didn't report what we'd actually seen. I just said I was doing a routine patrol with a permitted researcher, everything normal. I'd figure out the reporting later. Around 3:30 a.m., we drove back down to the canyon floor access road. The spot where the light had touched down was easy to find, even in the darkness. The ring of rocks was still there, but they weren't glowing anymore. They looked normal, just sandstone and red dirt. Ivy took samples, measuring everything, taking photos with her phone this time. The ring was exactly 31 feet in diameter. The rocks inside the ring were warm to the touch, probably 15 degrees warmer than the surrounding area. And right in the center, where the rectangle had touched down, there was a perfectly circular indentation in the sand, about 6 inches across and maybe an inch deep. "This shouldn't be here," Ivy said, kneeling beside the indentation. "The sand should have been blown away or scattered by air pressure if something landed here. But it's compressed. Something pressed down on it." "Take samples of everything," I told her. "Soil, rocks, whatever you can get. Document all of it." She worked quickly, filling sample bags and labeling them. While she did that, I walked the perimeter of the ring, looking for anything unusual. Tracks, debris, scorching, anything. But there was nothing. Just that warm ring of rocks and the central indentation. By the time we finished, the sky was starting to lighten in the east. Dawn comes slow in the canyon country, the sun taking its time to climb over the rim and drop its light down into the depths. "What do we do with all this?" Ivy asked, gesturing to her collection of sample bags. "Document it, study it, figure out what we saw. And if we can't figure it out?" I didn't have an answer for that. We drove back to the ranger station in silence. Ivy's car was parked there, a beat-up Honda Civic covered in dust and national park stickers. She loaded her samples into the trunk, along with my camera and her notes. "Are you going to report this?" she asked. "I don't know. Maybe, if I can figure out how to write it up without sounding crazy. Send me a copy of those photos. I'll go through them with my advisor, see if we can make sense of any of this." "Yeah, okay." She got in her car, then rolled down the window. "Trevor, you ever seen anything like this before?" "No, never." "Me neither. I've studied geology for 6 years. I've spent hundreds of nights in the field. I've never seen anything remotely like what we saw tonight." "You believe it was real? Not some kind of hallucination or mass hysteria?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We have photos. We have physical evidence. We have 2 separate watches showing different times. Whatever we saw, it was real." After she left, I sat in my truck and tried to write up a report. I got as far as 2:35 a.m. patrol of West Rim, and then I stopped. How was I supposed to describe what we'd seen? A vertical line of light that absorbed photons? A spinning disk that turned into a rectangle? A perfect circle of warm rocks and a time anomaly? In the end, I didn't file a report. I put the whole thing in a folder marked Personal Notes and tried to forget about it. But you don't forget something like that. It sticks with you. 3 years later, I still think about that line hanging in the canyon, perfectly vertical, perfectly still. I think about that rectangle descending like an elevator to nowhere, and I wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed longer, if we'd walked down into that ring of glowing rocks. Part of me is glad we didn't find out, but another part of me wishes we had. Ivy called me 2 weeks after that night. I was off duty, sitting in my apartment in Moab, trying to enjoy a beer and a basketball game. Her voice on the phone was tight, controlled, like she was working very hard to sound calm. "Trevor, it's Ivy Calder, from Dead Horse Point." "I remember. What's up?" "I need to show you something. Can you meet me at my lab at the university?" "When?" "Now. Tonight. I know it's late, but this can't wait." I looked at my beer, then at the TV. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. The drive from Moab to the university campus took me through empty desert highways, the kind where you can see your headlights cutting through the darkness for miles. I kept thinking about that night, about the way time had seemed to slip and slide around us. Ivy's lab was in the basement of the geology building, a cluttered space filled with rock samples, microscopes, and computer equipment that hummed constantly. She was waiting for me in the hallway, pacing. "Okay," she said as soon as she saw me. "Before I show you this, I need you to promise me you won't think I'm crazy." "After what we saw, I don't think anything could make me question your sanity." She led me into the lab and over to a computer workstation. On the screen was one of the photos from that night, the one showing the spinning disk of light. But it had been enhanced somehow, the contrast boosted, colors adjusted. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the center of the disk. "Right here." I leaned closer. In the very center of the spinning disk there was a dark spot. Not black, but darker than the surrounding light. It had structure to it, geometric shapes that my eyes couldn't quite resolve. Is that something inside the disk? That's what I thought at first, so I ran it through some image processing software, tried to clarify what we were looking at. She pulled up another image. This is what I found. The enhanced image showed what looked like symbols. Not letters or numbers, but geometric shapes arranged in a pattern. Circles connected by lines, triangles nested inside squares, curves that seemed to flow into each other. "That was inside the light?" I asked. "Embedded in it, yeah, and that's not all." She pulled up another image, this one from a different angle. The symbols were different, but they had the same style, the same geometric precision. I counted 23 photos we took that night. Every single one has symbols in it. Different symbols each time, like whatever this thing was. It was displaying different, messages, instructions. I have no idea. I stared at the screen. "Have you shown these to anyone else?" "My advisor, Dr. Ramirez." She's a geophysicist, spent 20 years studying anomalous phenomena in the Southwest. I figured if anyone would believe me, it would be her. And she told me to document everything, keep the samples secure, and absolutely do not publish any of this or show it to anyone outside her team. Why? Ivy pulled out a folder thick with papers. Because this isn't the first time. Dr. Ramirez has been collecting reports of similar phenomena in the canyon country for 15 years. Lights that don't behave like any known natural phenomenon. Time anomalies. Geometric patterns that show up in photographs but aren't visible to the naked eye. She has over 100 documented cases. 100? At least, most of them are from people like us. Rangers, researchers, people who spend a lot of time out there at night. But nobody talks about it because they're afraid of being labeled crazy. The ones who do report it usually get their observations dismissed as atmospheric phenomena or equipment malfunction. She spread papers across the lab table. I saw report after report, witness statements, photographs. One showed a blue sphere hovering over the San Rafael Swell. Another showed a rectangular light pattern on the wall of a canyon in Canyonlands. A third showed what looked like a figure standing on a canyon rim, but the figure was made of light. This one, Ivy said, pulling out a specific report. This happened 6 months before our encounter. A highway patrol officer named Marcus Dern was doing speed enforcement on Highway 24 near Capitol Reef. Around 2 a.m., he saw a series of lights moving through a canyon. Not flying, moving, like they were walking or sliding along the canyon wall. I read the report. Officer Dern had pulled over and watched the lights for approximately 10 minutes. He'd tried to radio it in, but his radio wouldn't work. When he checked his dash cam later, it had recorded the entire event, but the timestamp showed only 2 minutes had elapsed. The time thing, I said, it's consistent. Every report Dr. Ramirez has collected involves some kind of time discrepancy. Witnesses think they've been watching for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour. But their watches, their phones, their cameras all show much less time has passed. Or, in some cases, much more. What does she think is causing it? Ivy sat down, rubbing her eyes. She looked exhausted. She has a theory, but it's pretty out there. I just watched a rectangle of light descend into a canyon and compress time. I'm ready for out there. She thinks it's dimensional bleed. Dimensional what? Bleed. The idea that our reality, our dimension, isn't the only one. That there are other dimensions existing parallel to ours, and sometimes, under the right conditions, they can intersect. The canyon country might be one of those intersection points. I let that sink in for a moment. You're telling me that line we saw, that rectangle, that was something from another dimension, or something traveling between dimensions. Dr. Ramirez thinks the geometric symbols might be some kind of dimensional mathematics, equations or coordinates describing how to move between realities. That's insane. Is it? We saw something that defied physics, something that manipulated time and light in ways that shouldn't be possible. If you accept that what we saw was real, then you have to accept that our understanding of reality might be incomplete. She had a point. I didn't want to accept it, but she had a point. So what do we do? I asked. Dr. Ramirez wants to set up monitoring equipment at the site. Cameras, radiation detectors, electromagnetic sensors. She wants to see if we can capture another event and get real data this time, not just photographs and witness testimony. When? Next week. She's got funding for a 3-month monitoring period, but she needs permission from the National Park Service to set up equipment on protected land. I can help with that, I said. I'll talk to my supervisor, frame it as a geological survey or something. Would you? Because Dr. Ramirez thinks this is important. Not just scientifically important, but maybe historically important. If these events are some kind of communication or contact from another dimension, from another intelligence, we need to understand what's being communicated. Over the next week, I worked with Ivy and Dr. Ramirez to get the necessary permits. My supervisor was skeptical, but ultimately approved it as long as the equipment didn't interfere with the visitor experience and was removed at the end of the study period. We installed the monitoring station at the West Rim, right where Ivy and I had witnessed the event. 4 high-definition cameras covering all angles, electromagnetic spectrum analyzers, radiation detectors, atmospheric sensors, all of it running 24 hours a day, feeding data to Dr. Ramirez's servers. For the first week, nothing happened. Just normal desert night footage. Coyotes walking past the cameras, the occasional owl, the moon crossing the sky. Then, on day 8, at 2:17 a.m., all 4 cameras captured it simultaneously. The line appeared again, exactly where it had been before. Vertical, luminous, perfectly straight. The cameras recorded it for 6 minutes and 42 seconds. During that time, the electromagnetic sensors went crazy, detecting fields that shouldn't exist in nature. The radiation detectors picked up a brief spike in what Dr. Ramirez later identified as gamma radiation, but at levels too low to be dangerous, and the time anomaly happened again. According to the cameras, the event lasted 6 minutes and 42 seconds, but according to the atomic clock we'd installed with the equipment, which was supposedly accurate to within 1 second per million years, only 3 minutes and 8 seconds had elapsed. The cameras captured the symbols too. The geometric patterns were clearly visible in the light, shifting and changing throughout the event. Dr. Ramirez spent weeks analyzing them, trying to find any correlation to known mathematical or linguistic systems. She found something, not a translation, but a pattern. The symbols appeared to follow a fractal structure, each shape containing smaller versions of itself, which contained smaller versions still, potentially infinitely. It was mathematics, but not human mathematics. It was describing space in ways that shouldn't be possible in 3 dimensions. 4-dimensional geometry, Dr. Ramirez explained to us during one of our weekly meetings, or possibly higher. These symbols are showing relationships between spaces that can't exist in our normal perception of reality. So, what does that mean? I asked. It means whoever or whatever is creating these displays, they exist or operate in more dimensions than we do. They're trying to show us something about the structure of reality that we can't normally perceive. Why? That, Dr. Ramirez said, is the question, isn't it? The monitoring equipment captured 2 more events over the next month. Each time, the pattern was similar but not identical. The line appeared, compressed, spun into a disk, formed the rectangle, descended. The symbols were different each time, but they all shared that fractal structure. And each time, time itself seemed to bend around the event. On the last day of the monitoring period, I was at the site doing a final equipment check before we started breaking everything down. It was late afternoon, the sun low in the sky, casting long shadows across the canyon. Ivy was with me taking final photographs of the installation. We were alone out there, just the 2 of us, and the endless expanse of red rock and empty sky. You ever wonder what would happen if we tried to communicate back? She asked suddenly. What do you mean? All these events, all these displays. What if they're trying to make contact? What if they're waiting for a response? How would we respond? We don't know their language. We can barely understand their geometry. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the geometry is the language. Maybe they're teaching us how to see beyond our three-dimensional limitations. I thought about that while I coiled cables and packed equipment. Even if that's true, even if they're trying to teach us something, why here? Why the canyon country? Dr. Ramirez has a theory about that, too. The canyon formations create unique geological conditions. The layers of rock act like conductors for certain types of energy. The isolation means less electromagnetic interference from human activity. The altitude, the dry air, the mineral content of the rock. She thinks this area might be naturally conducive to dimensional overlap. So the canyons are like doorways? More like thin spots. Places where the barrier between dimensions is more permeable. We finished packing up the equipment as the sun set behind the western rim, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple. The canyon below us filled with shadow, that peculiar darkness that comes to deep places when the light retreats. "I'm going to miss this," Ivy said quietly. "Being out here, watching for something extraordinary. Back at the university, I'll just be another grad student grinding away at a dissertation about sedimentary formations. You've got more than that now. You've got evidence of something unprecedented. Evidence that most people will never believe. Evidence that will probably get dismissed as natural phenomena or equipment glitches. But you know better, we both do." She smiled at that. "Yeah, we do." We loaded the last of the equipment into my truck and drove back to the ranger station. The monitoring study was officially over, but something had changed in me during those 3 months. I couldn't look at the canyon country the same way anymore. Every night shift, every patrol, I found myself watching the sky, watching the canyon walls, waiting for that vertical line of light to appear again. It never did, not while I was watching anyway. But I know it's still out there, still appearing in the deep places where rock meets sky and time gets strange, still displaying its impossible geometry to anyone patient enough to witness it. And someday, maybe, we'll understand what it's trying to tell us. 6 months after the monitoring study ended, I got a call that changed everything. It was 11 p.m. on a Thursday. I was at home, halfway through a documentary about the Apollo missions, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "This is Trevor." "Ranger Salling, this is dispatch. We've got a situation at Island in the sky. Visitor reported seeing something unusual near Mesa Arch. Said it looked like someone was in distress, but when the witness went to help, there was nobody there, just lights." "What kind of lights?" "Witness says they were blue-white, moving across the rock face. Multiple lights, moving in formation. We've already sent Ranger Kimball out there, but he's requesting backup. Preferably someone with experience with unusual observations." They knew. Somehow, despite never filing an official report, people knew I'd seen something out there. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. I grabbed my gear and drove through the darkness toward Canyonlands. Island in the Sky is one of the most dramatic sections of the park. A massive mesa, surrounded by sheer cliffs dropping 1,000 feet to the canyon floor below. Mesa Arch sits right on the edge, a perfect stone arch framing the abyss beyond. When I arrived, Ranger Kimball was waiting in the parking area with a middle-aged couple from Colorado. The woman was wrapped in a blanket despite the warm night, and she looked shaken. "This is Ranger Salling," Kimball said. "He'll take your statement." The woman's name was Patricia Voss. She and her husband David had come to Mesa Arch to photograph the sunset, arrived late, and decided to wait until full dark to try some long exposure shots of the stars through the arch. "We were setting up the tripod," Patricia said, her voice trembling slightly. "Around 9:30, maybe 9:45. David was adjusting the camera settings when I saw movement down in the canyon. At first, I thought it was a hiker with a headlamp, but the lights were wrong. Too bright, and there were several of them. How many? 5, maybe 6. They were moving across the canyon wall, not climbing, just moving, horizontally across vertical rock. That's when I realized they couldn't be hikers. David picked up the story. I grabbed our camera and zoomed in. The lights were about 2 feet in diameter, perfectly round, and they were arranged in a specific pattern. 2 in front, 3 behind, all moving at exactly the same speed. Like they were connected somehow. Did they make any sound? That's the strange part, Patricia said. The canyon was completely silent. Usually you can hear wind, maybe a bird, something. But when those lights appeared, everything went quiet, like the whole world was holding its breath. How long did you watch them? The couple exchanged glances. That's where it gets weird, David said. Patricia thought it was maybe 5 minutes. I thought it was closer to 20. But when we checked the timestamp on our photos, we'd been standing there for 47 minutes. There it was again. The time anomaly. Did you get photos? David nodded and pulled out his camera, a high-end Canon with a telephoto lens. He scrolled through the images and my breath caught. The lights were there, clear as day. 5 perfect circles of blue-white radiance moving across the canyon wall. But in some of the photos there was something else. Between the lights, faint lines connected them, like they were part of a larger structure. And on the canyon wall itself, where the lights touched the rock, there were symbols. The same geometric symbols Ivy and I had seen in the spinning disk of light. "Can you send me these photos?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Already emailed them to Park Services," David said. "But I can send them to you directly if you want." I gave him my email, then asked if they'd be willing to show me exactly where they'd been standing when they saw the lights. They agreed, and the 4 of us walked out to Mesa Arch. The arch is maybe 50 feet across, a graceful curve of Navajo sandstone framing a view that drops away into darkness. During the day, you can see for miles, layer after layer of canyon country stretching to the horizon. At night, it's just an empty black void with stars above. "We were right here," Patricia said, pointing to a spot about 10 feet back from the arch. The lights appeared down there, on that vertical wall section. I pulled out my spotlight and aimed it at the canyon wall she'd indicated. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating red sandstone streaked with desert varnish. Nothing unusual. "Mind if I check something?" I asked. I pulled out my phone and called Ivy. She answered on the second ring. "Trevor, it's almost midnight. I need you to pull up those symbol images from Dead Horse Point, the geometric patterns. Can you send me the clearest ones? What's going on? I think we've got another event. Different location, but the same patterns." She was quiet for a moment. "I'll send them now. Are you at the site? Mesa Arch, Canyonlands. I'm on my way. Don't leave." While I waited for Ivy's email, I took my own photos of the canyon wall using the same angles David had captured. Ranger Kimball stayed with the Vosses, taking down additional details for the official report. My phone buzzed. Ivy's email. I opened the attachment and compared her enhanced images to David's photos. They matched. Not perfectly, but close enough that there was no question. The symbols that had appeared in the spinning disk of light at Dead Horse Point were now showing up on the canyon wall at Mesa Arch. Different configuration, but the same geometric language. "Trevor," Kimball called out. "Come look at this." He was standing at the edge of the arch, shining his flashlight down at the base of the stone structure. I walked over carefully and looked where he was pointing. Carved into the rock, barely visible, was a series of marks. They looked old, weathered by wind and rain, but they had structure, geometric structure. "Are those petroglyphs?" Kimball asked. "I don't know. They don't look like any Native American rock art I've ever seen. I took photos of the marks, then sent them to Ivy with a message. Found these at the site. Look familiar? Her response came back immediately. Those are the same symbols. Trevor, those carvings are at Mesa Arch? That's 60 miles from Dead Horse Point. Yeah, and according to witnesses, they were glowing tonight. I'm 40 minutes out. Wait for me. I sat down on the sandstone, away from the arch edge, and tried to process what this meant. The events weren't isolated to Dead Horse Point. They were happening across the canyon country, at different locations, but with the same visual language, the same geometric patterns. And something, had carved those patterns into the rock at Mesa Arch. Not recently. Those weathering patterns suggested the carvings were old, maybe very old. Patricia and David Voss came over and sat nearby. They'd calmed down somewhat, but I could see the questions in their eyes. Has this happened before? Patricia asked. Have other people seen things like this out here? I considered lying, keeping it simple and official. But these people had witnessed something extraordinary, and they deserved to know they weren't alone. Yes, I said. This isn't the first report. There have been similar observations throughout the canyon country for years. Lights that don't behave like natural phenomena. Time anomalies. Symbols that appear in photographs but aren't always visible to the naked eye. So we're not crazy, David said quietly. No, you're not crazy. Do you know what it is? What causes it? No, but there are people studying it. Scientists who are taking this seriously and trying to understand what's happening out here. Ivy arrived just after midnight, pulling up in her dust-covered Civic with a carload of equipment. She had cameras, electromagnetic sensors, sample collection kits, all of it. Show me everything, she said. We walked her through the observations, showed her the photos, the carved symbols, the exact location where the lights had been seen. She set up sensors and cameras, documenting everything with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Dr. Ramirez needs to see this, she said, after examining the carvings. These symbols, they're definitely the same geometric family as what we saw at Dead Horse Point. But these are weathered. Based on the erosion patterns, I'd estimate these carvings are at least several hundred years old, maybe older. So, this has been happening for centuries? Or longer? Trevor, what if this isn't a recent phenomenon? What if these events have been occurring in the canyon country for thousands of years? What if that's why indigenous peoples considered certain canyons sacred? What if they were witnessing the same things we're seeing now? The implications of that were staggering. We weren't dealing with some modern occurrence, some recent incursion or phenomenon. This was ancient. This had been happening for as long as humans had lived in this region. Ivy spent the next hour taking readings and samples. The electromagnetic sensors showed elevated fields around the carved symbols. Nothing dramatic, but definitely measurable. The rock itself was slightly warmer than the surrounding stone, just a few degrees, but consistent across all the symbol locations. Something happened here tonight, Ivy said. These rocks are retaining energy from the event. Whatever those lights were, they left a signature. We stayed at Mesa Arch until dawn, watching and waiting, but the lights didn't return. As the sky lightened and the canyon below emerged from darkness, I could see the full scale of the rock face where the lights had been. It was a vertical wall, maybe 400 feet high, stretching for a quarter mile along the canyon. And now that I could see it clearly, I realized there were more symbols carved into that wall. Not just at the arch, but scattered across the entire rock face. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all weathered by centuries of exposure but still visible if you knew what to look for. Ivy, I said, pointing. Look at the wall. She followed my gaze and went very still. Oh my God. We weren't looking at a few isolated carvings. We were looking at a message. A massive message written across an entire canyon wall in a language we were only beginning to understand. "We need to map this," Ivy said, her voice tight with excitement and something else, fear maybe, or awe. "Every symbol, every carving, we need to document all of it before we can even begin to interpret what this means." Over the next few weeks, Ivy and Dr. Ramirez organized a comprehensive survey of Mesa Arch and the surrounding canyon walls. They brought in specialists, archaeologists, linguists, mathematicians, all sworn to confidentiality, all working to document and analyze the symbols. What they found was extraordinary. The symbols at Mesa Arch were part of a larger network. Similar carvings were discovered at other locations throughout Canyonlands, at Horseshoe Canyon, at the Maze, at Dead Horse Point. Dozens of sites, all bearing the same geometric patterns, all weathered by centuries of exposure. And at every site, there were reports. Historical reports going back decades, sometimes centuries. Spanish explorers in the 1700s had written about mysterious lights in the canyons. Native American oral history spoke of spirit paths and sky beings that visited the sacred places. Modern hikers and rangers had filed dozens of observations over the years, most dismissed or forgotten. Dr. Ramirez compiled it all into a comprehensive database. Over 300 documented observations of anomalous lights, time discrepancies, and geometric patterns in the Utah Canyon country over the past 200 years. And that was just what had been recorded. How many more events had gone unreported, witnessed by people who kept quiet for fear of ridicule? "This is bigger than we thought," Dr. Ramirez told me during one of our meetings. "This isn't just about lights in the sky or time anomalies. This is about communication. Someone or something has been trying to communicate with humanity for a very long time, and the canyon country is where that communication is happening." Why the canyons? The geology, the electromagnetic properties of the rock formations, the isolation, the altitude. All of it creates ideal conditions for what I'm now calling dimensional intersection points. Places where the barrier between our reality and others is thin enough for information to pass through. "Information," I said. "That's what the symbols are? Information?" "I think so. Dr. Martinez, one of our mathematicians, has been analyzing the fractal structures in the symbols. He thinks they're describing spaces with more than 3 dimensions. 4, 5, maybe more. The patterns are mathematically consistent with theoretical models of higher dimensional geometry. So they're teaching us mathematics? Or they're describing where they come from. A place that exists in more dimensions than ours. And these symbols are like a map, showing the relationship between their space and ours." I thought about that for a long time. A map between dimensions. Instructions for crossing from one reality to another. "What do we do with this information?" I asked. "We keep studying it, keep documenting it, and maybe, eventually, we figure out how to respond." 3 months after the Mesa Arch event, I was back on night patrol. It was a quiet shift, the kind where hours pass and nothing happens except the slow wheel of stars across the sky. Around 2 a.m., I stopped at an overlook in the Needles District, one of the more remote sections of Canyonlands. The terrain here is different from Island in the Sky, more broken and complex, with towering sandstone pinnacles rising from the desert floor like petrified skyscrapers. I got out of my truck to stretch my legs and check the area. The air was cold and perfectly still, no wind at all. The silence was absolute. The kind of deep quiet that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. That's when I saw it. Down in the valley between the needles, a line of light appeared. Not vertical this time, but horizontal, stretching between 2 of the stone pinnacles like a bridge. It was maybe 2 feet wide and perfectly straight. glowing with that same clean white luminescence I'd seen at Dead Horse Point. I grabbed my radio to call it in, but my hand froze on the device. The light began to pulse, and with each pulse, symbols appeared along its length. The geometric patterns, clear and sharp, cycling through different configurations, and I realized, watching them shift and change, that there was a rhythm to it. A pattern in the pattern. It was showing me something, teaching me something. I stood there at the rim, watching that bridge of light pulse with its impossible mathematics, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not fear, not confusion, but understanding, or the beginning of understanding anyway. The canyons weren't just witnessing these events. The canyons were part of them. The rock, the space, the geometry of the formations themselves, all of it was connected to these displays of light and symbol. The canyon country wasn't just beautiful geology. It was a language, a three-dimensional message written in stone, waiting for someone to learn how to read it. And we were finally starting to understand the alphabet. I called Ivy immediately. Didn't matter that it was 2 a.m. This couldn't wait. "The needles," I said as soon as she answered. "Get Dr. Ramirez, get everyone. It's happening again. And this time it's different." They arrived within 90 minutes, a convoy of vehicles carrying equipment and specialists. By then, the horizontal line of light had faded, but I'd documented everything with my camera, my phone, even sketches in my patrol log. The symbols had been different from what we'd seen before, more complex, more layered. Dr. Ramirez set up her equipment while Ivy and I showed her the exact location and orientation of the light bridge. When we turned on the electromagnetic sensors, they immediately registered elevated readings. "It's still active," Dr. Ramirez said, studying her instruments. "Whatever created that display left a residual field. Trevor, describe exactly what you saw, every detail." I walked her through it. The horizontal line, the pulsing light, the cycling symbols, how they seemed to be teaching something, demonstrating a pattern. "Did the symbols repeat?" she asked. "Did any configuration appear more than once?" "Yes, there was one pattern that came back 3 times. A circle with nested triangles, connected by lines to a spiral structure." She pulled out her tablet and scrolled through our database of documented symbols. "This one?" The image on her screen showed exactly what I'd seen. "That's it. We've found this symbol at 14 different sites across the canyon country. It appears more frequently than any other pattern, and it's always carved deeper into the rock, like whoever made it wanted to emphasize its importance. What does it mean?" Dr. Martinez thinks it's a coordinate. Not a location in our 3-dimensional space, but a coordinate in higher dimensional space. A specific point where dimensions intersect. Ivy had been quiet, studying her own set of instruments. Now she looked up, her face pale. "Dr. Ramirez, the temperature readings. You need to see this." We gathered around her sensor array. The temperature data showed a pattern I'd never seen before. The air temperature in the valley between the needles had dropped by 7 degrees in a perfect circle, maybe 300 feet in diameter. Not gradually, but instantly, right when the light bridge had appeared. "Heat displacement," Dr. Ramirez said quietly. "Something pulled heat energy out of the air. But where did it go?" "Into another dimension," I suggested. "Possibly, or it was converted into the energy needed to create the display. Either way, this is the first time we've captured this kind of quantifiable physical effect." Over the next 6 hours, we documented everything. Soil samples, rock samples, electromagnetic readings, radiation levels, atmospheric composition. All of it went into Dr. Ramirez's growing database of evidence. As the sun rose and light flooded into the valley between the needles, I noticed something. The sandstone pinnacles weren't randomly arranged. When viewed from above, from the rim where I'd been standing, they formed a pattern. A geometric pattern that matched the symbols we'd been seeing. "Ivy," I said, pointing. "Look at the formation from this angle." She followed my gaze and went very still. "That's impossible." But it wasn't impossible. It was there, clear as day. The needles themselves, these massive towers of stone carved by millions of years of erosion, were arranged in the same pattern as the nested circles and triangles we'd seen in the light displays. Dr. Ramirez came over, looked where we were pointing, and let out a long, slow breath. The geology isn't random. It never was. The erosion patterns, the formation of these structures, they were guided somehow, influenced to create these specific shapes. That would take millions of years, Ivy said. Whoever or whatever is doing this would need to manipulate geological processes across timescales we can barely comprehend. Or, Dr. Ramirez said, they exist outside of time as we understand it. If they operate in more dimensions than we do, then time might not be linear for them. They could work on geological scales the same way we might arrange furniture in a room. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about lights in the canyons or symbols carved in rock. This was about the canyons themselves, the fundamental geology of the region, shaped over millions of years, all of it potentially influenced to create these patterns. We spent 3 days in the needles, mapping and measuring, trying to understand the full scope of what we were seeing. Other formations showed the same thing. Balanced rocks, arches, pinnacles, all of them arranged in geometric patterns that matched our symbol database. "It's a language made of stone," Ivy said on our last night there. We were sitting on the rim, watching the stars wheel overhead. "They're not just showing us symbols. They carved the symbols into the landscape itself. The canyons are the message." "Why?" I asked. "Why go to all this trouble to communicate with us? Maybe we're the ones who need to be ready. Maybe they've been waiting for us to develop enough to understand what they're showing us. And now that we're finally starting to see the patterns, really see them, maybe the communication can begin." "You think they're still out there? Still watching?" "I think they never left. I think they've been here the whole time, embedded in the geology, in the structure of space itself. We're just now learning how to perceive them." When I got back to the ranger station, there was a message waiting for me. Patricia and David Voss, the couple who'd witnessed the lights at Mesa Arch, had sent an email. They'd been contacted by other people who'd seen similar things in the canyons. Hikers, photographers, guides, people who'd kept quiet about their experiences for years, afraid of being dismissed or ridiculed. But word was getting out. Ivy's research, Dr. Ramirez's database, the increasing frequency of events. People were starting to talk, to share their stories, to realize they weren't alone. The email included a list of names and contact information. 47 people who wanted to contribute their observations to the research. 47 witnesses across 2 decades, all describing similar phenomena. Lights that defied explanation, time anomalies, symbols appearing in photographs, and that profound sense that something intelligent was trying to communicate. I forwarded the email to Dr. Ramirez and Ivy, then sat back and thought about what this meant. We were reaching a critical mass of witnesses, of evidence. At some point, this was going to break into mainstream awareness, and when it did, everything was going to change. 2 weeks later, I was finishing up a day shift when I got a call from Ivy. Her voice was shaking, but not with fear, with excitement. "Dr. Martinez did it. He cracked the pattern." "What pattern?" "All of them. The symbols aren't random, they're sequential, like chapters in a book or steps in an equation. He's been working with some quantum physicists and mathematicians at Princeton, and they figured it out. The symbols are instructions. Instructions for what? How to perceive higher dimensions. How to train your mind to see beyond three-dimensional space. Trevor, they've been trying to teach us how to see the way they see. That's what all of this has been about. She sent me Dr. Martinez's paper. It was dense, filled with mathematical concepts I barely understood, but the core idea was clear. The geometric symbols weren't just decorative or communicative. They were cognitive tools, designed to rewire human perception. By studying the patterns, by allowing your mind to grapple with the fractal structures and impossible geometries, you could begin to perceive space in new ways. Not physically seeing in higher dimensions, but conceptually understanding them, sensing them at the edges of awareness. So, when we watch these events, I said slowly, when we study the symbols and try to understand them, we're literally being taught how to see differently. Exactly. And the more people who learn to see this way, the more direct the communication can become. It's like learning a language. At first, you struggle with basic vocabulary, but eventually you can express complex ideas. Have you tried it? The perceptual exercises Dr. Martinez described? I have. And Trevor, it works. I can't explain it. But after spending hours studying the fractal structures, something shifted. When I look at the canyon formations now, I see more than just rock. I see the patterns underneath, the dimensional architecture. I didn't know what to say to that. The idea that our perception of reality could be fundamentally altered just by studying geometric patterns seemed impossible. But then again, so did lights that absorbed photons and vertical lines that compressed time. What happens now? I asked. Dr. Ramirez wants to publish. Not just a paper, but a book. Comprehensive documentation of every event, every symbol, every witness testimony. Make it all public and let the scientific community examine the evidence. She'll be laughed out of academia. Maybe. Or maybe there are enough people who've seen things, experienced things, that they'll actually listen. Dr. Martinez is at Princeton. His credentials are impeccable. If he puts his name on this research, people will pay attention. That night, I drove out to Dead Horse Point, back where it all started. The site where Ivy and I had first witnessed the vertical line of light and the time anomaly. I parked at the overlook and walked to the exact spot where we'd stood that night. The canyon stretched out before me, vast and dark under a canopy of stars. The moon had set, and the Milky Way was visible, that river of light flowing across the sky. I thought about everything that had happened, the lights, the symbols, the revelation that the canyons themselves were part of the message, the idea that something intelligent, something existing in dimensions beyond our perception, had been trying to communicate with humanity for thousands of years, and we were finally starting to understand. I pulled out my phone and opened the file containing Dr. Martinez's perceptual exercises. Geometric patterns designed to train the mind to think in higher dimensions. I studied them, really studied them, letting my eyes follow the fractal structures, the nested shapes, the impossible angles. And something shifted, not dramatically, not like a sudden revelation, but subtle, at the edge of awareness. The canyon before me looked the same, but also different. I could sense patterns in the rock formations that I'd never noticed before. Relationships between the shapes, the spaces, the negative areas between pinnacles and arches. The canyons weren't just beautiful, they were speaking. They'd always been speaking. We just hadn't known how to listen. I stood there until dawn, watching the light slowly fill the canyon, revealing layer after layer of red and orange and gold. And in those layers, in those patterns, I could see it now. The message written in stone, carved by processes that spanned millions of years, guided by intelligence that existed beyond our normal perception of time and space. Welcome, the canyons seemed to say. Welcome to the larger universe. Welcome to the understanding that reality is bigger and stranger and more beautiful than you ever imagined. We're ready, I thought. After all this time, after all these centuries of lights and symbols and mysterious events, humanity is finally ready to understand. And in the growing light of dawn, as the canyon walls glowed with reflected sunlight, I could have sworn I saw a response. A brief flash of light, perfectly vertical, hanging in the air for just a moment before fading away. Not an ending. A beginning. 6 months later, Dr. Ramirez published her book, Dimensional Intersections, Evidence of Higher Dimensional Communication in the Utah Canyon Country. It included testimony from 93 witnesses, analysis of over 200 events, mathematical interpretation of the geometric symbols, and geological surveys showing the non-random arrangement of canyon formations. The scientific community's response was mixed. Many dismissed it as pseudoscience or wishful thinking, but others, particularly in quantum physics and theoretical mathematics, took it seriously. Dr. Martinez's work on the fractal structures sparked genuine academic interest. More importantly, the general public responded. People who'd had their own experiences in the canyons came forward in droves, not just in Utah, but in similar geological formations around the world. The Grand Canyon, the slot canyons of Arizona, the gorges of South America. Everywhere there were deep places in the earth. There were reports of similar phenomena. The canyons were talking. They'd always been talking. We were just learning how to listen. I still work as a ranger in the canyon country. Still do night patrols, still watch the skies and the rock walls. But now, when I see something unusual, I don't question my sanity. I document it, study it, add it to the growing body of evidence. Because we're not alone. We've never been alone. We share this reality with something vast and ancient and patient, something that exists in dimensions we're only beginning to comprehend. And the canyons, these deep places carved into the earth over millions of years, are where they speak to us, where they teach us, where they wait for us to evolve enough to join the larger conversation that spans dimensions and timescales beyond human imagination. The line of light was just the beginning. The real communication is only starting now. I've spent 7 years photographing wildlife in the American Southwest. Bears in the Tetons, bighorn sheep in Colorado, mountain lions in Arizona. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I saw in the San Rafael Swell that October night. My name is Jenna Ackerley, and I make my living capturing images of animals that most people never see. The rare moments, the hidden behaviors. That means spending a lot of nights alone in remote places, waiting in the dark with my camera, hoping something extraordinary will wander into my frame. The San Rafael Swell is one of my favorite locations. It's this massive geological uplift in central Utah, full of slot canyons, sandstone formations, and wildlife corridors. Not as famous as Zion or Canyonlands, which means fewer tourists and more opportunities for genuine wilderness photography. I'd set up camp in a small clearing about a quarter-mile from the Little Wild Horse Canyon trailhead. The weather forecast had been perfect. Clear skies, no moon, ideal for star trail photography while I waited for any nocturnal animals to appear. My tent was basic, just a 2-person backpacking shelter, and I had my camera gear spread out on a tarp, batteries charging off my solar array. It was around 10 p.m. when I first noticed something wrong with the sound. I'd been sitting outside my tent, drinking instant coffee from my thermos and reviewing the day's shots on my laptop. The canyon was alive with its usual night sounds. Wind moving through juniper trees, the occasional screech of a barn owl, that constant low whistle that happens when air moves through narrow rock passages. Then it changed. The wind didn't stop exactly, but the way it sounded changed, like someone had put a blanket over a speaker. All the sharp edges of the sound got softer, muffled. The echo that normally bounced off the canyon walls just disappeared. I looked up from my laptop, listening. Something felt deeply wrong, but I couldn't identify what. The air pressure seemed different, heavier somehow, like right before a thunderstorm. But the sky was perfectly clear, stars sharp and bright overhead. That's when I saw the sphere. It appeared about 50 yards from my camp, hovering maybe 10 feet off the ground. At first, I thought it was someone else's tent with a bright lantern inside. But the light was wrong. Too blue, too pure. It was a perfect sphere of luminous blue light, maybe 3 feet in diameter, just hanging in the air above a cluster of sagebrush. I grabbed my camera on instinct. When you spend years training yourself to capture fleeting moments, you don't think, you just react. I had my telephoto lens attached, and I started shooting, bracketing exposures, trying different settings. Through the viewfinder, the sphere looked even stranger. The light seemed to come from within it, but it wasn't casting any shadows. My camera's light meter was going crazy, fluctuating wildly between readings that suggested it was as bright as the sun and readings that suggested there was no light at all. I lowered the camera and just watched. The sphere wasn't moving, wasn't making any sound. It just existed, this impossible ball of blue light hanging in the Utah desert like someone had placed it there and forgotten about it. Then I heard footsteps. Not animal footsteps. Human footsteps, boots crunching on the sandy ground. I turned and saw a man approaching from the direction of the trailhead. He was maybe 40, wearing hiking clothes and carrying what looked like professional audio equipment. "Don't move," he said quietly, holding up one hand. "Just stay exactly where you are." "What is that thing?" I whispered back. "I have no idea, but I've been tracking acoustic anomalies in this area for 3 months, and this is the first time I've actually seen one of the sources." He moved slowly, carefully, setting up what looked like a parabolic microphone aimed at the sphere. His hands were steady, practiced, like he'd done this 1,000 times. "I'm Rhett," he said, not taking his eyes off the sphere. "Rhett Collings. I'm an acoustic researcher from the University of Utah. Jenna Ackerley, wildlife photographer." "What do you mean, acoustic anomalies?" "Sound dead zones. Places where echo patterns don't make sense. I've been mapping them across the canyon country for a research project on how geological formations affect sound propagation. Except the anomalies I'm finding don't match any known acoustic phenomenon." The sphere pulsed. Just once, a slight dimming and then back to its original brightness. Rhett's equipment registered it. I could see the meters spiking on his recording device. "Did you see that?" I asked. "I saw it, but look at this." He showed me his meter. According to my sensors, that pulse generated no sound, 0 decibels, but at the exact same moment, the ambient sound level dropped by 15 decibels. It's not making sound, it's absorbing it. I looked at the sphere again, and now that he'd said it, I could feel it. The muffled quality to the night sounds wasn't because they were quieter. It was because the sphere was drinking in the sound waves before they could reach my ears. How is that possible? It's not, at least, not according to any physics I know. We stood there, both of us documenting the sphere with our different equipment. My camera, his audio sensors, neither of us wanted to get closer. There was something about the sphere that made approach feel dangerous, not in an aggressive way, but in a fundamental way. Like approaching it would be crossing a threshold we couldn't uncross. The sphere began to move, not horizontally, vertically. It rose slowly, smoothly, ascending toward the canyon rim about 200 feet above us. As it rose, the acoustic dead zone moved with it. I could track its progress by the way the sound changed. When it passed over a juniper tree, the rustling of the branches went silent. When it rose past a cliff face, the wind echo cut off abruptly. "It's heading for the rim," Rhett said, already packing his equipment. "Come on." "What? No. We should stay here, document from a safe distance. The access road to the rim overlook is only a 10-minute drive. If we move now, we can get there before it reaches the top." I looked at my camp, my gear spread out, my tent. Every instinct said, stay put, stay safe. But I'd built my career on chasing rare moments, on being willing to follow wildlife into uncomfortable situations. "Fine, but I'm driving. You navigate." We threw our essential equipment into my truck, a beat-up Ford Ranger that had hauled my gear across half the Southwest. Rhett directed me along a dirt road that wound up the side of the canyon, gaining elevation quickly. Through the windshield, I could see the sphere still rising, its blue light a beacon against the starry sky. The road was rough, full of washboard bumps and loose rocks. My truck bounced and rattled, equipment sliding around in the back despite my attempts to secure everything. Rhett braced himself against the dashboard, watching the sphere through the passenger window. "It's maintaining a constant ascent rate," he said, checking his watch. "Exactly 3 feet per second. That's too precise to be natural. Something is controlling it. Or something is what it is. Maybe it's not a thing being controlled. Maybe it is the control mechanism." He looked at me. "That's a disturbing thought. Everything about this is disturbing." We reached the rim overlook in 8 minutes. I killed the engine and we both jumped out, grabbing our equipment. The sphere was still rising, now maybe 50 feet below the rim level. We ran to the edge, where a low barrier of stacked rocks kept vehicles from driving over the cliff. The view from up here was spectacular, even without the sphere. The canyon spread out below us, a maze of red sandstone formations glowing silver in the starlight. You could see for miles, layer after layer of geological time exposed in the canyon walls. And rising toward us, impossibly blue and bright, was the sphere. "Get ready," Rhett said, his recording equipment active, meters dancing. "When it reaches rim level, something's going to happen. These anomalies follow patterns. There's always a secondary event when they reach their apex." "What kind of secondary event?" "That's what I've been trying to document. They're different every time. Sometimes it's a temperature change. Sometimes it's electromagnetic interference. Once, in Goblin Valley, every compass within half a mile spun backwards for exactly 12 seconds. The sphere reached rim level and stopped, hovering directly in front of us, maybe 20 feet away. This close, I could see that it wasn't perfectly uniform. There were patterns in the light, subtle variations in brightness that moved across its surface like clouds across a blue sky. I was shooting continuously, my camera's shutter clicking rapid fire. Through the telephoto lens, I could see even more detail. The patterns weren't random. They had structure, geometry, like seeing the shadow of something three-dimensional projected onto a two-dimensional surface. "Rhett," I said quietly, "look at the patterns. They're not random." He moved next to me, watching the sphere directly. "You're right, they're organized, like pixels on a screen displaying an image, but the image is in a format we can't fully perceive." The sphere pulsed again, brighter this time. And then the sound disappeared. Not muffled, not absorbed, completely gone. The wind that had been whistling through the canyon, the rustle of sagebrush, the crunch of gravel under our feet as we shifted position, even the sound of our breathing. All of it ceased. We existed in perfect, absolute silence. I could see Rhett's mouth moving, trying to speak, but no sound emerged. My ears felt strange, not like they were blocked, but like the concept of sound had temporarily ceased to exist. I could feel my heart beating in my chest, but I couldn't hear it. The silence lasted maybe 5 seconds, maybe 10. Time felt weird, stretched out, like each moment was taking longer to pass than it should. Then sound rushed back in, all at once, so loud and sudden that both Rhett and I staggered backward. It wasn't that the sounds themselves were louder, but after that void of silence, even normal volume felt overwhelming. The sphere had moved. While we were experiencing the silence, it had traveled down into the canyon. It was now at least 200 feet below rim level, descending at the same steady rate it had risen. "Did you get that?" Rhett asked, his voice shaky. "Did your camera capture the silence?" I don't know how a camera could capture silence, but I was shooting the whole time. The photos will at least show the sphere's position before and after. We watched it descend until it reached the canyon floor and disappeared behind a rock formation. The normal night sounds resumed, wind and wildlife, and the constant low whistle of air through stone passages. Rhett was checking his equipment, scrolling through data. This is impossible. My recorder was running the entire time. During that silence period, the sound level meter registered negative 15 decibels. Sound can't be negative. Exactly. It's not measuring the absence of sound. It's measuring something that actively negates sound, like negative matter, but for acoustic waves. I was reviewing my photos, scrolling through the sequence on my camera's screen. The sphere showed up clearly in every shot, and I could see the progression of patterns on its surface. But something else caught my attention. "Rhett, look at this." I showed him a sequence of 3 photos, taken 1 second apart. In the first, the sphere was at rim level, patterns visible. In the second, the patterns had changed, become more complex, more layered. In the third, taken right after the silence event, the patterns were completely different. Not an evolution of the previous design, but something entirely new. "It's not just displaying patterns," I said. "It's cycling through them, like it's showing us different, messages, configurations. Or it's trying different frequencies, different methods of interaction." He pulled out a notebook and started sketching the patterns from my photos. His drawings were precise, capturing the geometric relationships between the elements. "You're good at that," I said, watching him work. "Architecture degree before I switched to acoustics. I can't not see structure in things." He finished the sketches and held them up, comparing them to the photos. "These patterns have mathematical relationships. Look here. This curve is the inverse of this one. And these angles are all multiples of 37 degrees. That's not random. 37? Why 37? No idea, but it's showing up consistently across all 3 pattern configurations." We spent the next hour at the rim, hoping the sphere would reappear. Rhett set up multiple sensors, creating a network of acoustic monitoring stations. I changed to a wide-angle lens and mounted my camera on a tripod, doing long exposures to capture the stars and any potential light phenomena. Around midnight, Rhett's sensors started registering something. Not the sphere, but something else. The ambient sound level in the canyon was fluctuating in a rhythmic pattern. Not loud enough to consciously hear, but measurable on his equipment. "It's like a pulse," he said, showing me the graph on his laptop. "Every 11 seconds, the ambient sound drops by 3 decibels for exactly 1 second, then returns to normal. Could it be natural? Wind patterns or something? Wind doesn't pulse with that kind of precision. And look, the pulses are getting faster. Now, it's every 10 seconds, every 9 seconds. It's accelerating. I could feel it now, or thought I could. That same heavy pressure in the air that I'd felt before the sphere appeared. Like reality was thickening somehow, becoming denser. Something's coming, I said. Another event. Multiple events. Look at this. He pulled up a map on his laptop, showing the San Rafael Swell region with multiple markers. I've been documenting acoustic anomalies for 3 months. Every marker is a location where I've recorded unexplained sound phenomena. Dead zones, echo inversions, frequency shifts. The map showed dozens of markers scattered across the swell in what looked like a random distribution. But as I studied it, I realized they weren't random at all. They're forming a pattern, I said. Connect the outer markers and you get... What is that, a hexagon? Almost. It's a 6-sided figure, but the angles aren't quite uniform. More like an organic hexagon. Something grown rather than constructed. And we're right in the middle of it. He nodded, dead center. This overlook is equidistant from all 6 boundary points. If something is happening in this region, if these anomalies are building towards some kind of cumulative event, this is where it's going to manifest. The pulses were now coming every 5 seconds. The pressure was increasing and I was starting to get a headache. That same feeling you get when a storm front moves in fast. Maybe we should leave, I suggested. Document from a safer distance. There is no safer distance. If I'm right about the hexagonal pattern, the entire swell is the active zone. Being at the center is no more dangerous than being at the edge. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be accurate. At exactly 12:17 a.m., according to both our watches and Rhett's atomic synced recording equipment, 6 spheres appeared simultaneously. Not one sphere this time. 6 of them arranged in a perfect circle around the rim of the canyon, each one identical to the one we'd seen earlier. Perfect spheres of blue light, 3 feet in diameter, hovering 10 feet off the ground. And they were all looking at us. I know that sounds crazy. Spheres don't have eyes, don't have faces, but I swear they were focused on us, on this specific point where we were standing. Are you getting this? I asked Rhett, my camera already shooting. Every sensor is maxed out. Whatever these things are, they're generating enough acoustic interference to overwhelm my equipment. The spheres began to move, not toward us, but around us, maintaining their circular formation while rotating clockwise. As they moved, they left trails of light in the air, blue after images that persisted for several seconds before fading. And the silence came back. But this time it was different. This time I could hear something in the silence. Not a sound exactly, but the ghost of sound. Like listening to music through water, distorted and far away, but definitely there. Rhett grabbed my arm, pointing. The light trails the spheres were leaving behind weren't fading anymore. They were connecting, forming lines between the spheres, creating a geometric structure in the air above the canyon. A 3-dimensional pattern made of light, hanging in space, silent except for that ghost sound that my mind couldn't quite process. And then I realized what the ghost sound was. It was echo. Echo that was arriving before the sound that created it. The spheres weren't absorbing sound. They were reversing it, making it run backward through time. We need to record this, Rhett said, but his voice sounded wrong. Stretched out like a tape playing at the wrong speed. Time was breaking. I could feel it. Each moment lasting too long or maybe too short, I couldn't tell which. The spheres rotated faster, their light trails becoming a solid structure. a cage or dome made of blue light hovering over the canyon. And in the center of that dome, something began to materialize. Not physical, not entirely, but something. A presence, a consciousness, looking at us through the geometric lattice of light, studying us the way a scientist might study cells under a microscope. My camera was still shooting, shutter clicking in that weird stretched-out time, capturing images I knew would be impossible, but were happening anyway. Then, just like that, it stopped. The spheres vanished. The light structure collapsed. Time snapped back to normal with an almost audible click. The silence ended, and normal night sounds rushed in to fill the void. Rhett and I stood there, breathing hard, staring at the now empty air, where the impossible thing had been. "Tell me you saw that," I said. "I saw it. My equipment saw it. But I have no idea what we saw." We stood there for a long moment, neither of us quite ready to move or speak or process what had just happened. Then my camera beeped, memory card full. We drove back to my camp in silence. Not the strange, oppressive silence of the spheres, just normal human silence, both of us too overwhelmed to talk. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating sagebrush and sandstone. Everything looking perfectly normal now. Like nothing extraordinary had happened, but it had happened. We both knew it. When we got back to my campsite, I made coffee while Rhett started processing his audio data. Real coffee this time. Not instant, using my camping French press. Some situations require proper caffeine. "My timestamps are corrupted," Rhett said, staring at his laptop. "According to my atomic clock, the event lasted 93 seconds. According to my recording device, it lasted 8 minutes and 47 seconds. According to my watch, it lasted 3 minutes and 12 seconds. I checked my camera. I shot 847 frames during the event. My camera shoots at 5 frames per second. That's almost 3 minutes, which matches my watch but contradicts both the atomic clock and the recording device. So, which one is right? Maybe all of them. Maybe none of them. If the spheres are manipulating time somehow, then duration becomes relative. It lasted different amounts of time depending on what you were measuring with. I handed him a mug of coffee and sat down on my camp chair, suddenly exhausted. I've been doing wildlife photography for 7 years. I've spent hundreds of nights alone in remote places. This is the first time I felt genuinely scared. Scared of what? The spheres didn't threaten us. They just existed, performed their display and left. That's what scares me. The indifference. If they'd been hostile or aggressive, I'd at least understand the dynamic. But they weren't interacting with us. We were just incidental witnesses to something that would have happened whether we were there or not. Rhett nodded slowly. Like watching a natural phenomenon, except nothing about this was natural. "Do you have other data? From your previous months of research?" "Extensive data. Audio recordings, environmental readings, eyewitness accounts. I've interviewed 17 people who've experienced acoustic anomalies in the canyon country. Park rangers, hikers, geologists. Most of them didn't report it officially because they didn't want to sound crazy. Can I see the interviews?" He pulled up a folder on his laptop labeled Field Reports and started showing me the files. Each one was a detailed account of someone experiencing something that shouldn't be possible. A ranger at Capitol Reef who heard echoes that arrived before the original sound. A hiker in the maze who described walking through a zone where all sound had weight and texture, where you could feel words as they were spoken. A geologist at Horseshoe Canyon who recorded audio of rocks singing, actual melodic tones emanating from the canyon walls with no apparent source. "They're all describing similar impossible things," I said. "Sound behaving in ways that violate physics." "Right, and they're all happening in the same general region, the canyon country of southern Utah, within a rough hexagonal area covering about 600 square miles. Why here? What makes this region special? Geology, maybe. The Colorado Plateau is geologically unique. Ancient seabeds uplifted and eroded, creating these complex layered formations. The rock composition, the air pressure variations, the electromagnetic properties of the mineral deposits. Something about this environment creates conditions where these phenomena can occur. Or something is using this environment, the way you'd use a tuning fork or a speaker. The geology isn't causing the phenomena, it's facilitating them. He looked at me with new interest. You think something is deliberately using the canyon formations as tools? You saw the same thing I did. Those spheres were organized, purposeful. They created that geometric structure with specific intention. And the way they manipulated sound, time, perception, that's not random, that's technology. Or something like technology. Technology implies intelligence. You're suggesting that whatever created those spheres is using the Utah Canyon country as some kind of equipment? I'm suggesting we consider all possibilities, even the unsettling ones. We spent the next few hours comparing his data with my photographs. The patterns on the sphere surfaces, when compared to his audio frequency analysis, showed correlation. Certain geometric configurations corresponded to specific sound frequencies, particularly in ranges below and above human hearing. Infrasound and ultrasound, Rhett explained. The spheres are generating acoustic energy in ranges we can't consciously perceive, but which still affect us physically and neurologically. Is that why time felt weird? Possibly. Certain infrasound frequencies can affect the brain's temporal processing, making time seem to slow down or speed up, but that still doesn't explain the discrepancies in our recording devices. Around 3 a.m., exhausted and no closer to understanding what we'd witnessed, we decided to get a few hours of sleep. Rhett pitched his tent next to mine, and we agreed to wake at first light to examine the canyon floor where we'd first seen the single sphere. I lay in my sleeping bag staring at the tent ceiling, listening to the normal night sounds. Wind, wildlife, the constant whisper of air moving through rock. Everything sounded different now. Every sound made me wonder if it was natural, or if something was manipulating it, shaping it, using it for purposes I couldn't comprehend. I must have eventually fallen asleep, because I woke to bright sunlight and the smell of instant oatmeal. Rhett was already up, heating water on his camp stove. "Morning," he said. "How'd you sleep?" "Not well. You?" "Same." I kept waking up, thinking I heard the spheres. Just wind, every time. We ate quickly and packed our day gear. I brought my camera with a standard lens along with a wide-angle backup. Rhett brought his portable audio equipment, smaller and lighter than the rig he'd used last night, but still professional grade. The hike down to the canyon floor took about 40 minutes, following a trail that switched back and forth across the canyon wall. At the bottom, the temperature was at least 10 degrees cooler, the canyon walls providing shade and trapping the cold air that settled during the night. "It should be right around here," I said, checking my GPS and comparing it to the photos I'd taken from the rim. Where the sphere first appeared, near that cluster of sagebrush. We searched the area carefully, looking for any physical evidence. Scorched ground, radiation traces, disturbed soil, anything that might indicate something unusual had occurred here. What we found was subtle, but it was there. The sagebrush, where the sphere had hovered, looked normal at first glance. But when you looked closely, really closely, you could see that all the leaves were oriented in the same direction. Not the random distribution you'd expect from natural growth, but a uniform alignment, like iron filings near a magnet. "Magnetic field," Rhett said, holding up a compass. The needle was spinning slowly, never settling on any particular direction. There's residual magnetism here, strong enough to affect plant growth and disrupt compass navigation. I photographed the sagebrush from multiple angles, documenting the leaf orientation. How long would a magnetic field need to be present to affect plant growth like this? Days, maybe weeks. These plants didn't reorient overnight. Whatever created that magnetic field has been here for a while. We expanded our search, moving in a spiral pattern around the initial location. 20 feet out, we found more evidence. Rock surfaces that should have been covered with the usual desert varnish, that dark patina created by bacterial growth and mineral deposition, were clean. Not scrubbed clean, but clear, like the varnish had been selectively removed. Selective weathering, I said. Or selective unweathering. The varnish is gone, but the rock surface underneath isn't damaged. Whatever removed the patina did it without abrading the stone. Sonic cleaning, maybe. High-frequency sound waves can remove surface contaminants without damaging the underlying material. But you'd need sustained, focused ultrasound to do this. We found a pattern in the cleaned rocks. They formed a circle, about 30 feet in diameter, with the sagebrush cluster at the center. And within that circle, there were symbols. Not carved, not painted. The symbols were created by the selective removal of desert varnish, revealing the lighter sandstone underneath. Geometric shapes, circles connected by straight lines, angles that looked precise and intentional. "Rhett," I said quietly, "tell me you're seeing this. I'm seeing it, and I've seen it before." He pulled out his notebook, flipping to a page filled with sketches. 3 weeks ago in Goblin Valley. Similar symbols, same technique. Varnish removed, but stone undamaged. You didn't mention that last night. I didn't know if they were related, but now... He compared his sketches to the symbols on the ground. They're not identical, but they're using the same geometric language. Same types of shapes, same angular relationships. I photographed everything, taking wide shots to show the overall pattern and close-ups to capture the details. The symbols were remarkably precise, the edges clean and sharp. Whoever or whatever created them had control at a microscopic level. Why leave symbols? I asked. If these spheres are just natural phenomena or random manifestations, why create patterns that look deliberately communicative? Because they are communicative. These aren't just phenomena, Jenna. These are messages. Someone or something is trying to tell us something, using the only medium they can, light, sound, and time manipulation. But what are they trying to say? That's what we need to figure out. We spent 2 more hours documenting the site, taking measurements, recording the exact GPS coordinates, collecting soil samples. Rhett used his audio equipment to check for residual acoustic signatures, finding subtle anomalies in the way sound echoed off the rocks within the circle. "The echo timing is off," he explained. "Sound should bounce off these rock surfaces at predictable intervals based on distance and air temperature. But inside this circle, the echoes are arriving 0.03 seconds early, consistent across all frequencies. Early echo, like the sound is traveling faster than it should, or taking a shorter path, or moving through a different medium. What if the space inside this circle is slightly different from normal space? A bubble of altered reality where physical laws operate differently." The implications were staggering. If the spheres could create pockets of altered space even temporarily, what else could they do? How far did their capabilities extend? We hiked back to camp in thoughtful silence. The morning was warming up, the sun climbing higher, burning off the cool air that had settled in the canyon overnight. By the time we reached our campsite, it was easily 80 degrees. "I need to report this to my department," Rhett said. downloading data from his equipment to his laptop. Dr. Kingston, my advisor, he's been waiting for concrete evidence of the acoustic anomalies. This is beyond concrete. This is incontrovertible. Will he believe you? He'll have to. I have audio recordings, electromagnetic readings, GPS data, photographic evidence, and I have you as a corroborating witness. I don't know if my testimony will help. I'm a wildlife photographer, not a scientist. No credentials beyond a decent eye for composition. You're a trained observer with years of field experience. That counts for more than you think. I hoped he was right, but I'd been around academia enough to know that extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence, and even extraordinary evidence could be dismissed if it challenged fundamental assumptions about reality. What do you think they want? I asked. The intelligence behind the spheres. What's their goal? Maybe they don't want anything. Maybe they're just exploring, studying us the way we study wildlife. You spend nights in remote places photographing animals in their natural habitat. Maybe we're the animals being photographed, and the canyon country is their observation blind. It was an unsettling thought. The idea that we were specimens being documented by something that operated on a level we couldn't fully comprehend. Or maybe they're trying to teach us something. Rhett continued. The symbols, the patterns, the way they manipulate sound and time. Maybe it's all instructional, a curriculum designed to expand our understanding of physics. That's optimistic. I'm an optimistic person. Also, pessimism doesn't help in research. You have to assume there's an answer, a pattern, something comprehensible. Otherwise, why bother looking? We worked through the afternoon, organizing our data, cross-referencing his audio analysis with my photographs. The patterns on the sphere surfaces showed up clearly in my images, and when Rhett overlaid them with his frequency analysis, correlations emerged. Specific geometric configurations on the spheres corresponded to specific sound frequencies. Not random frequencies, but mathematically related ones. Harmonic series, Fibonacci sequences, golden ratios. The spheres were displaying visual representations of acoustic mathematics. It's a language, Rhett said, his voice filled with excitement. They're using geometry to represent sound relationships. Look, this spiral pattern corresponds to a descending harmonic series. This angular pattern matches a standing wave frequency. They're teaching us how to see sound. Or how they perceive sound. Maybe this is how their senses work. They experience sound as visual geometry. Which means, when they look at our world, they see it completely differently than we do. Where we see colors and shapes, they might see acoustic patterns and frequency relationships, an entirely different mode of perception. My phone buzzed. No signal, but my weather app had updated the last time I was in town. Storm forecast for tonight, moving in fast. Not unusual for October in Utah. The weather could change dramatically in a few hours. We should probably pack up, I said. Or at least secure everything. Flash floods are a real risk in these canyons. Are you planning to leave? I thought about it. The smart thing would be to pack up and head to town, wait out the storm in comfort and safety. But something made me hesitate. What if the storm triggers another event? I asked. Electrical activity, pressure changes, increased moisture in the air. What if those are favorable conditions for the spheres? Rhett grinned. You want to stay and find out? I want to document it if it happens. This might be our only chance to observe the phenomena under different environmental conditions. That's terrible scientific practice. We should establish baseline observations before introducing variables. But you're staying anyway. Of course I'm staying. This is the most significant discovery of my career, possibly of my lifetime. I'm not leaving just because of some rain. We secured our camps. moving sensitive equipment into our tents, weighing down tarps, and staking guy lines with extra care. The weather was already changing, clouds building in the west, that peculiar bronze quality to the light that comes before desert storms. By 6 p.m., the wind had picked up significantly. Not the steady flow of normal desert wind, but gusty and turbulent, switching directions unpredictably. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in 30 minutes. And then I felt it again. That pressure, that heaviness in the air that I'd felt before the spheres appeared, but stronger this time, more intense. "Rhett?" I called out. "I think something's happening." He emerged from his tent, equipment already in hand. "I feel it too. Barometric pressure is dropping fast, faster than the weather alone can account for." The first raindrops hit, fat and heavy, kicking up tiny explosions of dust where they impacted the dry ground. Lightning flickered in the clouds to the west, thunder following several seconds later. And above the canyon rim, glowing against the darkening sky, 6 blue spheres materialized. The spheres appeared in the same circular formation we'd seen the night before, but this time they were higher, positioned above the canyon rim rather than at ground level. And they were brighter, competing with the lightning flashes, casting blue shadows across the rock formations. "They're positioned at the vertices of the hexagon," Rhett said, checking his GPS map. "Each sphere is located at one of the acoustic anomaly sites I've been tracking." The rain intensified, going from scattered drops to a steady downpour in seconds. Desert storms don't mess around. They arrive suddenly and hit hard. Within minutes, we were soaked despite our rain gear. But the spheres weren't affected by the rain. The drops passed through them without disruption, like they were holograms projected into 3-dimensional space. Except holograms don't generate magnetic fields or manipulate sound and time. "Set up the audio array," I said, already mounting my camera on the tripod and covering it with a rain sleeve. "If we're going to document this, let's do it right." Rhett deployed his sensors in a triangular formation around our camp, creating a 3-dimensional map of the acoustic environment. His equipment was designed to be weather-resistant, sealed against moisture and dust. The spheres began to pulse in sequence, starting with the one to our north and moving clockwise around the circle. Each pulse was accompanied by a flash of lightning, perfectly synchronized, like the spheres were conducting the storm. "That's not coincidence," Rhett said, watching his sensors. "Look at the timing. The spheres pulse, then exactly 0.7 seconds later, lightning strikes. They're triggering it somehow. Or predicting it. Maybe they can sense the electrical potential building in the atmosphere and they're marking when and where it will discharge. Either way, there's a connection between the spheres and the storm. They're interacting with the electromagnetic environment." The wind shifted, and suddenly we were in the eye of it. Air swirling around our position, but our immediate location relatively calm. The sphere's circular formation created a boundary, and the storm was respecting that boundary. Thunder rolled through the canyon, not the sharp crack of close lightning, but the deep, sustained rumble of sound echoing off rock walls. Except the echo was wrong. It should have decayed, fading gradually. Instead, it amplified, growing louder until it was no longer recognizable as thunder. It sounded like voices, not words, not language, but tones that suggested communication, rising and falling pitches, rhythmic patterns, the cadence of conversation. The canyon walls were singing, and the song was being shaped by the spheres. "Are you hearing this?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the sound. Rhett nodded, his face pale. "It's acoustic manipulation on a massive scale. They're using the entire canyon system as a resonance chamber. Every surface is reflecting and amplifying sound according to their design." "What are they trying to say?" "I don't know, but I'm recording everything. If there's meaning in this, we can analyze it later. break it down frequency by frequency. The sphere voices, for lack of a better term, grew more complex. Harmonies emerged, counterpoint, the intricate structure of music without melody. It felt less like listening and more like being listened to, like the sound was probing us, examining our responses. I felt it in my chest, in my bones, the low frequencies vibrating through my body, making my heart rhythm sync to external patterns. Rhett was experiencing it too. I could see him swaying slightly, his breath timing matching the sound pulses. "We need to record how this affects us," I said, forcing myself to focus despite the overwhelming sensory input. "Document the physiological response. This isn't just sound, it's affecting consciousness. Already on it." He'd pulled out a pulse oximeter, clipping it to his finger. Heart rate elevated but steady. Blood oxygen normal. But I feel like I'm understanding something without knowing what I understand. That was exactly right. The sensation of meaning hovering just beyond conscious grasp, like a word on the tip of your tongue or a memory almost surfacing. The rain stopped, not gradually but instantly, mid-downpour. Drops hung suspended in the air, thousands of them frozen in place like someone had pressed pause on reality. "Rhett," I whispered, afraid to speak normally, afraid to disturb whatever was happening. "The rain. I see it. Time manipulation again, but more localized and controlled than before." The suspended raindrops began to move, but not down. They moved horizontally, drawn toward the spheres like iron to a magnet. Streams of water flowing through the air, defying gravity, collecting around each sphere in rotating rings. The spheres absorbed the water, and as they did, their color shifted. Blue to blue-green to green, taking on the color of the moisture they consumed. And they grew larger, expanding from 3 feet in diameter to 5 feet to 7 feet to 10. "They're using the storm," Rhett said, "harvesting its energy, its matter. This isn't just observation or communication. This is resource collection." The enlarged spheres began to merge, their edges touching, surfaces flowing together like soap bubbles combining. 6 spheres became 3, became one massive sphere hovering directly over the canyon, easily 50 feet in diameter, glowing with an aquamarine light that illuminated the entire landscape. And the symbols appeared. Not on the sphere's surface this time, but projected onto the canyon walls. Hundreds of them, thousands, covering every rock face in sight with complex geometric patterns, the same visual language we'd seen before, but now displayed at architectural scale. "It's a map," I said, recognizing the patterns from my overhead photos. "The symbols are showing the topology of the canyon system. Look, this section corresponds to Little Wild Horse Canyon. This section is Bell Canyon. They're describing the entire geological structure." But why? What's the purpose of mapping something they can clearly already perceive? Maybe it's not for them. Maybe it's for us. Maybe they're showing us how they see this place, trying to help us understand their perspective. The megasphere began to descend, lowering slowly toward the canyon floor. As it moved, the symbols on the walls animated, flowing like liquid, rearranging into new configurations. "It's not just topology," Rhett said, watching the patterns shift. "It's showing process, flow. Look at how the symbols move along the canyon channels. They're demonstrating how water moves, how wind moves, how sound propagates. It's a 4-dimensional map showing spatial relationships and temporal changes. A map of how the canyon behaves over time." Exactly. The sphere reached the canyon floor and settled there, its surface now perfectly reflective, mirror smooth. I could see our camp reflected in it, distorted by the curve but recognizable, and I could see us. two tiny figures standing on the rim, watching something that shouldn't exist. Then the sphere opened, not like a door, not mechanically. It simply became permeable, its surface transitioning from solid to translucent to transparent. And inside, we could see structure, not mechanical structure, something organic or beyond organic. Patterns of light moving in 3 dimensions, weaving through each other, creating shapes that my eyes couldn't quite focus on. Like looking at a 3-dimensional object projected from 4 dimensions, able to see parts of it but never the whole thing at once. "We need to get closer," Rhett said. "Down to the canyon floor. This might be our only chance to directly examine whatever this is." "Are you insane? We have no idea if it's safe." "We have no idea if anything about this is safe. But we're scientists. Well, I'm a scientist and you're a documentary photographer. Our job is to document and understand, even when it's uncomfortable or risky." He had a point. This was why we were here, what we'd stayed for despite the storm warning, an opportunity to observe something unprecedented. Fine, but we stay together, we maintain constant communication, and if anything feels wrong, we retreat immediately. The trail down to the canyon floor was treacherous when wet, the sandstone slick and crumbly. We descended carefully, testing each foothold, using our hands for balance. It took 20 minutes to cover what would normally be a 10-minute hike. At the bottom, the scale of the sphere was overwhelming. 50 feet in diameter means it towered 4 stories above us, dominating the canyon like a second sun. The light it emitted wasn't harsh, despite its brightness. It felt soft, diffuse, like being inside a cloud. The internal structures were more visible from this angle. I could see patterns within patterns, fractals spiraling into infinity, each level containing the same complexity as the whole. And they were moving, flowing, responding to our presence. "It knows we're here," I said quietly. "Of course it does. This whole display is for our benefit, or at least it's including us in its calculations." Rhett approached the sphere's surface, holding out his audio sensors. "The surface is generating sound, not audible sound, but I'm detecting ultrasonic pulses, very precisely timed, very specifically shaped." "What are they doing?" "Echolocation, maybe, or acoustic scanning. It's using sound to map everything around it, building a 3-dimensional picture of the environment." I was photographing everything, knowing that words and memory wouldn't be enough to capture this. My camera was barely adequate for the task. The dynamic range was too limited, the resolution too coarse. But it was what I had. One of the internal light structures moved toward us, flowing through the transparent surface until it hovered just a few feet away. This close, I could see it was made of individual points of light, millions of them arranged in a specific 3-dimensional pattern. And I recognized the pattern. It was the same as the symbols projected on the canyon walls, but now shown in full 3-dimensional form. Not a 2-dimensional representation, but the actual structure, revealed in its native dimensionality. "Rhett," I said, understanding dawning, "the symbols we've been seeing, the 2-dimensional patterns, they're shadows, projections of 3-dimensional structures. We've been looking at cross-sections of something bigger, like seeing a sphere pass through a 2-dimensional plane and seeing it as a circle that grows and shrinks. We're 3-dimensional beings trying to perceive something 4-dimensional, so we only see the 3-dimensional slices that intersect with our reality." The light structure pulsed, and I felt it in my mind. Not a sound, not a physical sensation, but a direct information transfer. Images, concepts, understanding flowing into my consciousness without the medium of language or symbols. I saw the canyon country as it had been millions of years ago. Shallow seas, layers of sediment accumulating, the slow uplift of the Colorado Plateau. The formation of the rock layers, the beginning of erosion, the carving of canyons by water and wind. But there were other elements in this vision. Points of light, similar to the spheres, present throughout the geological timescale. Not random appearances, but consistent presence. They'd been here the whole time, witnessing and documenting the formation of these landscapes. "They're old," I said, struggling to put the understanding into words. "Not just old as individuals, but old as a phenomenon. They've been observing this place for geological timescales, millions of years." Rhett was experiencing the same information transfer, his face slack with wonder. "They're not visitors, they're residents. They've been part of this environment longer than our species has existed." The vision shifted, showing human history in the canyon country. Ancient Puebloans creating petroglyphs on rock walls. Spanish explorers mapping the region. Modern tourists photographing arches and canyons. And at various points throughout this history, the spheres appearing, observing, documenting. Humans had seen them before, many times. Some cultures incorporated them into their mythology, their spiritual understanding. Others dismissed them as natural phenomena or tricks of light, but they'd always been there, constant witnesses to human activity in this region. "Why?" I asked, directing the question at the light structure. "Why observe us? What's the purpose?" The response came not in words, but in feeling. Curiosity. The desire to understand. The same impulse that drove human scientists, artists, explorers. They watched us for the same reason we watched wildlife, to document, to learn, to appreciate the diversity of experience. "We're not test subjects," Rhett said, understanding blooming across his face. "We're interesting. To them, human consciousness is as fascinating and worth studying as these geological formations. We're part of the landscape they're documenting." The light structure withdrew, flowing back into the sphere's interior. The transparent surface began to cloud, transitioning back to translucent, then to the mirror-smooth reflective state. The symbols on the canyon walls faded, and the massive sphere began to contract. Not shrinking exactly, but condensing, concentrating itself. 50 feet became 40, became 30, became 20. The light grew more intense as the size decreased, until it was almost painful to look at directly. At 10 feet in diameter, it split. One sphere became 2, became 3, became 6 again. The original configuration, each one positioned at its vertex of the hexagon. And then, one by one, they blinked out. North sphere first, then moving clockwise, each one disappearing with a soft pulse of light. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Gone. The canyon was dark again, lit only by our headlamps and the faint starlight filtering through the broken clouds. The storm had passed while we were focused on the sphere. The rock faces were wet but clean, no more symbols projected on them. We stood in the silence, processing what we'd experienced. The direct information transfer, the vision of geological time, the understanding that we'd been in the presence of something ancient and purposeful. "Did that really happen?" Rhett asked quietly. "Yes, I have photos. You have audio data. But more than that, I have memories that feel more real than anything I've experienced before. That wasn't imagination or hallucination. That was communication. Direct consciousness to consciousness transfer. No language barrier because there's no language involved, just pure meaning. We need to document this while it's fresh. Write down everything we experienced, every detail we can remember." We climbed back to the rim in darkness, our headlamps lighting the way. The trail was still slick, but the rain had stopped completely. Above us, stars emerged from between the dispersing clouds. Back at camp, we spent the next 4 hours writing, recording, organizing our thoughts. Rhett described the technical aspects, the acoustic measurements, the electromagnetic readings, the precise timing of events. I focused on the experiential side, what it felt like, what I'd perceived, the emotional and psychological impact. When we finally finished, exhausted and mentally drained, dawn was approaching. The eastern sky was brightening, that pure, clear light that comes after desert storms have washed the atmosphere clean. What do we do with this? I asked. How do we present findings that include direct telepathic communication with entities that manipulate time and space? Carefully, very carefully. The physical evidence is solid: audio, photos, electromagnetic data. That gets us credibility. The experiential aspects, the consciousness transfer, that's going to be harder to defend. But it's the most important part. The physical phenomena are impressive, but the meaning behind them, the intentionality, that's what matters. I know, and we'll document it all, but we have to expect resistance, skepticism, accusations of fraud or delusion. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and even with everything we have, some people won't believe us. Some people, but others will. People who've had their own experiences, their own encounters with phenomena they can't explain. For them, our documentation will be validation. The sun rose, golden light spilling into the canyon, illuminating the rock faces where the symbols had been projected. In daylight, there was no trace of them. The desert varnish was undisturbed, the rock surfaces showing only the slow accumulation of millions of years. But we knew what we'd seen, and we had evidence. We stayed in the San Rafael Swell for another 3 days, hoping for another event. But the spheres didn't reappear. The weather stayed clear, no storms to trigger whatever conditions had produced the massive 50-foot sphere and its consciousness transfer. During those 3 days, we explored the locations of the other 5 vertices in the hexagonal pattern, checking each site for physical evidence or residual anomalies. Every location showed the same characteristics: magnetic field distortions, misaligned plant growth, areas of cleaned rock surfaces with geometric patterns revealed underneath. The entire region is active, Rhett said as we documented the 5th site. This isn't isolated phenomena. It's a network, an interconnected system using the canyon country as its structure. And we're just beginning to understand the scale of it. How many other regions are there like this? Other geological formations being used for observation and documentation. Dr. Kingston mentioned similar reports from the Grand Canyon, from Canyon de Chelly, from various slot canyon systems throughout the Southwest. If they're all connected, if they're all parts of the same observational network, then we're talking about a study area covering thousands of square miles. On our last night in the swell, we sat at the canyon rim and watched the sunset. The rock formations glowed orange and red, those famous colors that made Utah Canyon Country one of the most photographed landscapes on Earth. You know what I keep thinking about? I said. That vision they showed us. Millions of years of observation. If they've been here that long, documenting geological and biological changes, then they have a record of this place that no human archive could match. Imagine what we could learn from that. Climate change over millennia, evolutionary adaptations, migration patterns of species long extinct. They've witnessed things that happened before humans existed to observe them. But why share that with us? Why give us that glimpse into their perspective? Maybe they're ready for us to know. Maybe humanity has reached a point in our development where we can finally begin to comprehend what they've been trying to show us all along. Or maybe we were just in the right place at the right time, and they decided to include us in their documentation, the way a wildlife photographer might let a curious fox examine the camera. Rhett laughed. So, we're the curious foxes in this scenario? We're definitely something being observed. The question is whether we're ready to be conscious participants in that observation rather than just passive subjects. We drove back to Moab the next morning, both of us exhausted but energized. The kind of productive exhaustion that comes from intensive field work, from pushing yourself to document and understand something that initially seems incomprehensible. Rhett went straight to the university to present his findings to Dr. Kingston in the acoustics department. I went to my studio apartment and started the long process of reviewing and organizing my photographs. Out of the 847 frames I'd shot during the first Sphere event, 739 showed something. Clear images of the spheres, the light patterns, the geometric structures. Not all were perfect. Some were blurred or poorly exposed, but the good ones were extraordinary. The symbols on the sphere surfaces showed up with remarkable clarity. I could see individual elements, count the lines and curves, measure the angles. With image processing software, I enhanced the details even further, revealing structures within structures, patterns within patterns. And I found something Rhett and I had missed during the initial analysis. The symbols weren't static. When viewed as a sequence, frame by frame, they animated. They showed motion, progression, development. Like a flipbook, each image a frame in a larger narrative. I called Rhett immediately. The symbols are animated. They're not individual static messages, they're frames in a sequence. We need to view them as motion, not as still images. Can you send me the sequence? I want to correlate it with my audio data, see if there's a relationship between the visual animation and the acoustic patterns. I exported the image sequence and sent it to him. 2 hours later, he called back. You're right, they sync perfectly. The visual patterns progress in direct correlation with the acoustic frequencies. It's not just communication, Jenna. It's multimedia communication. They're using both visual and auditory channels simultaneously to convey meaning. Like how humans use speech and body language together. Multiple information streams that combine to create fuller meaning. Exactly. But their system is more sophisticated than ours. The visual and auditory elements aren't just complementary, they're mathematically linked. Change one and the other changes predictably. It's a unified language where sound and light are different expressions of the same underlying information. Over the next 2 weeks, Rhett and I worked together to analyze and document our findings. He handled the technical aspects, writing up the acoustic analysis, the electromagnetic measurements, the time anomaly calculations. I focused on the visual documentation, creating a comprehensive photo essay showing the progression of events. Dr. Kingston was cautiously supportive. He acknowledged that the data was compelling and unlike anything in the existing literature on acoustic phenomena. But he urged caution in how we presented our conclusions, particularly the aspects involving consciousness transfer and potential non-human intelligence. The physical measurements will be accepted, Dr. Kingston told us during one meeting. The acoustic anomalies, the electromagnetic fields, even the time discrepancies, those are all documentable and verifiable. But claiming direct communication with non-human entities? That's going to be met with extreme skepticism. But it happened, I said. We both experienced it. The information transfer was real. I believe you experienced something, but the scientific community will demand alternative explanations. Hallucination induced by infrasound exposure, electromagnetic effects on the temporal lobe, suggestion and expectation creating shared delusion. You need to address those possibilities before claiming extraordinary consciousness transfer. He was right, of course. The standards of evidence for extraordinary claims had to be higher. We couldn't just present our experience and expect it to be accepted at face value. What if we could replicate it? Rhett suggested. Return to the site with proper monitoring equipment. medical-grade EEG sensors, multiple witnesses. Document not just what we perceive, but what's happening in our brains during the experience. That would strengthen your case considerably. Objective measurements of subjective experience. If you can show that both of you exhibit identical neurological responses during the consciousness transfer event, that's evidence of something external affecting you, not just internal hallucination. That became our plan. Organize a return expedition to the San Rafael Swell, properly funded and equipped with multiple observers and comprehensive monitoring equipment. Not just Rhett's audio gear and my camera, but EEG monitors, magnetometers, radiation detectors, atmospheric sensors, everything we could think of. But funding that kind of expedition required convincing people that it was worth the investment, which meant presenting our preliminary findings to a wider audience, accepting scrutiny and skepticism, defending our observations against alternative explanations. Rhett started with an internal presentation to the acoustics department, showing his audio data and the correlation with my photographs. The response was mixed. Some faculty members were intrigued, saw potential for groundbreaking research into acoustic propagation in complex geological environments. Others were dismissive, suggesting equipment malfunction or environmental factors we'd failed to account for. But one person was convinced. Dr. Sarah Vega, a physicist specializing in exotic states of matter and space-time structures. She approached us after Rhett's presentation with questions that showed she understood the implications of our data. "The time anomalies you documented," she said, "they're consistent with localized space-time curvature. Small-scale gravitational effects, like miniature versions of what happens near black holes or neutron stars. If your spheres are manipulating space-time, that would explain both the time discrepancies and the unusual acoustic behavior." "How would they generate that kind of gravitational field?" Rhett asked. "It would require enormous energy. Not if they're not generating it from scratch. What if they're accessing energy from another dimension, or from quantum vacuum fluctuations? We know those energy sources exist theoretically. If something has technology to tap them, you could produce localized space-time effects without massive energy expenditure." She became our third team member, bringing physics expertise and access to equipment we couldn't get otherwise. With her involvement, we secured preliminary funding for a follow-up expedition. Not a lot, but enough to rent proper equipment and support a week-long intensive observation period. We planned the expedition for late October, 1 year after our initial encounter. The timing was deliberate. Similar seasonal conditions, similar weather patterns, maximizing the chance that we'd encounter the spheres again under comparable circumstances. Word got out. Despite our attempts to keep the project low profile, other researchers heard about it. Some were supportive, offering equipment loans or technical advice. Others were hostile, spreading rumors that we were running a pseudoscientific publicity stunt. The controversy got media attention. A local news station did a segment on UFOs in the Canyon Country, which made us look like credulous believers in alien visitors. A popular science podcast interviewed Rhett, giving him a platform to present the actual data, but their audience was skeptical, pointing out all the ways our observations could be explained by conventional phenomena. Through it all, I kept returning to those photographs. The spheres hanging in space, their impossible geometry, the symbols flowing across their surfaces. I'd photographed bears and big cats, captured images of wildlife behavior that researchers used in their publications. This felt the same, documenting something real, something that existed independent of human belief or skepticism. 2 days before we were scheduled to leave for the Swell, I got an unexpected visitor at my apartment. A middle-aged woman, neatly dressed, carrying a folder of papers. "Miss Ackerley, my name is Margaret Rios. I'm a retired park ranger, I heard about your research and I need to tell you something." I invited her in, made coffee, and listened to her story. She'd worked as a ranger in Canyonlands for 23 years, mostly night shifts and backcountry patrol. During that time, she'd experienced acoustic anomalies similar to what Rhett and I had documented. Dead zones where sound disappeared, echo inversions, and twice she'd seen the spheres. "I never reported it officially," she said. "Back then, if you reported seeing anything unusual, you got reassigned to desk duty pending psychological evaluation. The Park Service didn't want rangers spreading stories about mysterious lights in the canyons. Bad for tourism, they said." "What did you see?" "The same things in your photographs. Blue spheres, geometric patterns, time anomalies where I'd lose minutes or hours without remembering where they went. The first time, I convinced myself it was heat exhaustion, dehydration, something explainable. The second time, I couldn't deny it anymore. Something real was happening in those canyons." She opened her folder and showed me photographs, old film prints, dated from the early 1990s. They showed what looked like light anomalies above canyon rims, though the quality wasn't as clear as my digital images. "I kept these hidden for 20 years, never showed anyone except my husband. But when I heard about your research, I realized it was time. You're doing what I should have done back then, documenting it properly, insisting that it's real despite the skepticism. Thank you for coming forward. Would you be willing to provide a formal statement? Your testimony as an experienced park ranger would add credibility to our research. That's why I'm here. I want to be included in whatever report you publish. Use my photographs. Use my testimony. Use whatever helps establish that these phenomena are real and have been occurring for decades." She became our fourth witness, strengthening our case that this wasn't isolated delusion or equipment malfunction. Multiple observers, different time periods, consistent descriptions of similar phenomena. The expedition launched on October 20th. 5 of us this time. Rhett, Dr. Vega, Margaret, myself, and a graduate student named Thomas who was helping with the technical equipment. We established a base camp at the same location where I'd originally camped and set up monitoring stations at all 6 vertices of the hexagonal pattern. The first 3 nights were quiet. Clear weather, no storms, no spheres. Just patient observation and equipment maintenance. We rotated watches, making sure someone was always monitoring the sensors. On the 4th night, Vega's electromagnetic sensors registered an anomaly. Small at first, just a slight elevation in ambient field strength, but building steadily, following a pattern that suggested something was approaching. "Everyone to your stations," Rhett said quietly. "I think we're about to have visitors." We'd rehearsed this. Each person had assigned equipment and documentation responsibilities. Rhett on audio, Dr. Vega on electromagnetic and gravitational sensors, Thomas on atmospheric monitoring, Margaret and I on visual documentation. The spheres appeared at 11:47 p.m., all 6 simultaneously, in the now familiar circular formation. But they were different this time. Instead of blue, they glowed violet, a color I'd never seen them display before. "Violet suggests higher frequency radiation," Dr. Vega said, watching her instruments. "They're operating at a different energy level than your previous observations." The spheres began their rotation, leaving light trails that connected into a geometric structure. Thomas's atmospheric sensors registered a pressure drop, temperature decrease, humidity increase, conditions similar to what we'd seen during the storm event. But there was no storm tonight. Clear skies, no clouds, no precipitation. The spheres were creating these atmospheric effects, not responding to them. The violet light intensified, and I felt that familiar pressure. that heaviness that preceded consciousness transfer. I activated the EEG monitor I was wearing, making sure it was recording my brain activity. "Here it comes," I said. "The transfer is beginning." The information flowed in. Not the geological vision this time, but something different. Mathematics. Pure, abstract mathematics. Geometric relationships. Equations describing space and time and dimensions beyond human perception. I couldn't understand it, not consciously. The math was too advanced, too foreign, but it was going into my mind anyway, being stored somewhere for later processing, like downloading a file I didn't know how to open yet. Next to me, Rhett was experiencing the same thing. His EEG monitor showed spikes of activity in regions associated with mathematical reasoning and spatial processing. My monitor showed the same pattern. "We're synchronizing," Dr. Vega said, watching both readouts. "Your brain activity is mirroring each other. That's not consistent with hallucination or individual delusion. Something external is affecting both of you identically." The transfer continued for what felt like hours, but was only 7 minutes according to our atomic clock. 7 minutes of pure information flowing into human minds, being stored in neural pathways that would take months or years to fully integrate and understand. When it ended, the spheres didn't vanish immediately. They remained visible, pulsing slowly, like they were waiting for a response. "Try communicating back," Margaret suggested. "If they're trying to teach us, show them we're learning." I didn't know how to respond to pure mathematics with human words, but I could try to show understanding through the same medium they'd used. I visualized the geometric patterns they'd shown us, the fractal structures, the impossible angles, held them in my mind as clearly as possible. One of the spheres pulsed brighter. A response. Rhett did the same, visualizing the acoustic patterns, the frequency relationships they'd encoded in their displays. Another pulse. We were communicating, not with words or conventional symbols, but with pure thought, pure visualization, showing them that we'd received their message and were trying to understand it. The spheres began to fade, their violet light dimming gradually rather than the sudden disappearance we'd seen before. Like they were satisfied, like this exchange had accomplished what they intended. When they were gone, we checked all our equipment. Everything had recorded. Audio, electromagnetic data, gravitational measurements, atmospheric readings, EEG monitors, photographs, comprehensive documentation of the entire event. "This is it," Dr. Vega said, reviewing the data. "This is proof. Reproducible, documented, with multiple witnesses and objective measurements. This is the evidence the scientific community needs." We spent the next 2 days checking and rechecking the data, making sure we hadn't missed anything, that our equipment had functioned correctly, that our documentation was complete. The EEG data was particularly compelling. During the consciousness transfer, Rhett and I had exhibited identical brain activity patterns, something that shouldn't happen unless both of us were receiving identical external stimuli. And the patterns themselves were unusual, activity in brain regions that normally don't activate simultaneously, suggesting information processing that human brains aren't typically capable of. "You've been altered," Dr. Vega told us. "Not damaged, but changed. Those information transfers have created new neural pathways, expanded your capacity for mathematical and spatial reasoning. You'll probably notice effects over the coming weeks and months, improved ability to visualize complex geometries, enhanced pattern recognition, maybe even intuitive understanding of advanced mathematics you've never formally studied." "So, they're not just observing us," I said. "They're upgrading us, teaching us to perceive what they perceive. Or trying to. Whether we can successfully integrate what they're teaching us remains to be seen." Human brains are adaptable, but there are limits. We returned to civilization with our data and immediately began the process of writing up our findings for publication. Not a single paper, but a series, each focusing on different aspects of the phenomena: the acoustic anomalies, the electromagnetic effects, the consciousness transfer, the implications for physics, and our understanding of reality. The reviews were brutal. Most journals rejected our submissions outright, citing insufficient evidence or inadequate consideration of alternative explanations. A few accepted the purely technical papers, Rhett's acoustic analysis, Dr. Vega's gravitational measurements, but rejected anything that mentioned consciousness transfer or potential non-human intelligence. But we persisted, published what we could in smaller journals, presented at conferences, made our data publicly available for independent verification. Slowly, very slowly, the tide of skepticism began to turn. Other researchers reported similar phenomena. A team in Arizona documented light spheres near slot canyons. A group in New Mexico recorded acoustic anomalies matching Rhett's data. Evidence accumulated, corroboration grew. 3 years after that first night when I saw the sphere hovering near my camp, the mainstream scientific community finally acknowledged that something real was happening in the canyon country. Not everyone agreed on what it was. Theories ranged from exotic natural phenomena to technology from an unknown intelligence. But the denial phase was over. We were accepted. Our observations were validated. And the real work could begin. Comprehensive study of these phenomena, understanding their nature and purpose, learning what they were trying to teach us. I still photograph wildlife. That's still my career, my passion. But now I also photograph the spheres, documenting their appearances, tracking patterns in their behavior, building a visual archive of something that exists at the edge of human understanding. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the canyons at night, I feel them watching. Not hostile, not threatening, just observing. The way I observe wildlife, with curiosity and respect, and the desire to understand. We're not alone in these canyons. We've never been alone. There's an intelligence here, ancient and patient, watching and documenting and occasionally reaching out to share what it knows. And we're finally learning to reach back. The spheres still appear in the San Rafael Swell, in canyonlands and canyon country throughout the Southwest. They're still manipulating sound and light and time, still displaying their impossible geometry. But now we're watching back. Now we're learning their language. Now we're starting to understand what they've been trying to show us all along. The canyon echo carries their voice, if you know how to listen. And more of us are learning every day. I've been photographing the night sky for 9 years. Started as a hobby when I was in college, became an obsession, and eventually turned into my career. I sell prints online, license images to magazines, run workshops teaching other people how to capture the Milky Way in all its glory. My name is Marin Lovell, and I thought I'd seen everything the night sky had to offer. Meteor showers, auroras on rare occasions when they dipped far enough south, satellite trails, the International Space Station passing overhead. I'd photographed it all. Until that night on Highway 24, just outside Torrey, Utah. It was late September, the best time for astrophotography in the canyon country. The monsoon season was over, the air was clear and dry, and the moon was in its new phase, perfect darkness for capturing the stars. I'd scouted a location during the day, a pullout on Highway 24, with an unobstructed view south toward Capitol Reef National Park. I arrived around 10 p.m., set up my camera on a sturdy tripod, and started shooting. Long exposures, 30 seconds each, capturing the dense band of the Milky Way as it arched across the sky. The temperature had dropped to maybe 50 degrees, comfortable with a jacket, and there was almost no wind. Perfect conditions. Highway 24 isn't busy at night. Maybe one car every 10 or 15 minutes, usually locals heading home to Torrey or Bicknell. I'd learned to watch for headlights and pause my shooting when vehicles approached. Didn't want light trails ruining my star images. Around 11:30, I was reviewing shots on my camera's screen when I noticed something odd in my peripheral vision. An orange glow coming from the direction of the highway. Not headlights. The color was wrong, and it wasn't moving like a vehicle would move. I looked up from my camera and saw it clearly. Maybe 200 feet down the road, centered perfectly in the middle of the highway, was a sphere of orange light. Not bright orange like a traffic cone or a safety flare. This was softer, almost amber, like looking at a sunset through thick fog. It was just sitting there, hovering about 3 feet off the pavement, completely still, completely silent. My first thought was someone's emergency flashers, but the light wasn't flashing. It was constant, steady, and it had a quality I'd never seen in artificial light. It didn't cast shadows. The pavement beneath it should have been illuminated, should have been glowing orange, but it looked normal. Gray asphalt, exactly as it should appear at night. I grabbed my camera off the tripod, switched to a shorter exposure, and started shooting. Through the viewfinder, the sphere looked even stranger. My camera's autofocus couldn't lock onto it, kept hunting back and forth like it couldn't find anything to focus on. I switched to manual focus and estimated the distance. The sphere didn't move, didn't pulse or flicker, just existed there in the middle of the highway, defying every rule of light and physics I understood. I thought about approaching it, getting a closer look, but something stopped me. An instinct, a feeling that crossing the distance between where I stood and where that sphere hovered would be a mistake. Not dangerous, necessarily, but wrong somehow, like walking through a door you know you shouldn't open. Then I heard an engine, vehicle approaching from the east, headlights visible in the distance. A car was coming, driving straight toward the sphere. I waved my arms, trying to flag them down, but they were too far away to see me. The vehicle kept coming, maintaining speed, heading directly for that orange glow in the middle of the road. I watched, expecting the driver to brake, to swerve, to react in some way to the obvious obstacle in their path. But the vehicle didn't slow down. It drove straight through the sphere's position and kept going, except the sphere was still there, unchanged, unmoved, like the vehicle had passed through empty space. The vehicle, a pickup truck I could see now, continued past me, the driver apparently unaware of anything unusual. Taillights receding into the distance toward Torrey, completely normal driving behavior. I looked back at the sphere. Still there. Still glowing that impossible orange. Still casting no shadows and making no sound. I was alone with it again, and the silence felt heavier now. Not the comfortable silence of a desert night, but something more oppressive. Like the air itself had texture, had weight, and was pressing down on everything. My phone rang, shockingly loud in the quiet. I fumbled it out of my pocket, hands shaking slightly. Unknown number, local area code. Hello? This is Officer Renshaw with Utah Highway Patrol. Are you the vehicle parked at mile marker 47 on Highway 24? Yes, that's me. I'm just doing some photography. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to move your vehicle. We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area tonight. Suspicious activity? What kind of activity? There was a pause. Just move your vehicle, please, for your own safety. Wait, before you hang up, there's something in the road, about 200 feet west of my position. An orange light just hovering there. Can you see it on your dash camera or anything? Another pause, longer this time. Stay where you are. I'm 3 minutes out. Don't approach the light, don't try to leave, just stay with your vehicle. He hung up. I stood there holding my phone, watching the orange sphere, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. The patrol car arrived faster than 3 minutes, coming from the west with lights flashing but no siren. It slowed as it approached the sphere's position, and I expected it to stop, to acknowledge the obvious anomaly in the middle of the highway. But it didn't stop. It drove straight through, just like the pickup truck, as if nothing was there. The patrol car pulled up next to my vehicle, and Officer Renshaw got out. He was maybe 40, tall and solid, with the careful movements of someone who'd been doing this job for a long time. "Ms. Lovell?" he asked, checking the registration I'd handed him through my window. "Yes. Did you see it? The orange light in the road?" "What I saw," he said carefully, "was an empty highway and your vehicle parked on the shoulder. Tell me exactly what you're seeing." "The sphere. The orange sphere, right there in the middle of the road." I pointed. "You're telling me you don't see it?" He followed my gesture, looking directly at where the sphere hovered. His expression didn't change. "I see Highway 24. Pavement, center line, nothing else." "How is that possible? It's right there. It's been there for at least 10 minutes. Let me check something." He went back to his patrol car and pulled out what looked like a handheld camera or sensor. He pointed it toward where I was indicating, watched the display screen, then came back to me. Thermal imaging shows ambient temperature. No heat signature, no cold spots, nothing that would indicate an object in that location. "But I can see it. I have photographs of it." "May I see your camera?" I showed him the shots I'd taken. On the camera's small display screen, the sphere was clearly visible. Orange glow in the middle of the road, exactly as I was seeing it with my eyes. Officer Renshaw's expression changed. Not alarm, but something close to it. Recognition, maybe, like he'd seen something similar before. "Ms. Lovell, I need you to send me these photos immediately. Also, I need you to pack up your equipment and follow me to the Torrey substation. We need to document this properly." "Document what? You said you don't see anything." "I don't, but you do, and your camera does, and that's significant. Please, just trust me on this." I started breaking down my setup, but I kept glancing at the sphere. It was still there, unchanging, that same soft orange glow. And now that Officer Renshaw was here, something about it felt different. Like it was aware of us, like it was waiting for something. "How long have these been happening?" I asked, while I packed my camera bag. "Reports of suspicious activity, you said. This isn't the first incident, is it?" "Pack your equipment, Miss Lovell. We'll discuss it at the station." I loaded everything into my car, a 10-year-old Subaru Outback that had hauled my gear across half of the western United States. Officer Renshaw walked back to his patrol car, and I expected him to get in and wait for me to follow. Instead, he walked past it, walked straight toward the sphere. "Wait," I called out. "What are you doing?" "Testing something. Stay there." He approached carefully, each step measured. When he was maybe 20 feet away, he stopped, pulled out his flashlight and aimed the beam directly at where the sphere hovered. The beam passed through empty air. No reflection, no scattering, no interaction with the orange glow at all. The light continued past where the sphere should be and hit the pavement beyond. But from my position, I could still see the sphere. Solid, real, unaffected by the flashlight beam passing through it. "You're shining your light right through it," I said. "Right through the center of it." "I'm shining my light at empty road," he replied. "Nothing is blocking the beam." "Then why can I see it? Why does my camera record it?" "That's what we need to figure out." He came back to his patrol car, and that's when I noticed his dashboard camera. The angle would have captured the sphere perfectly when he drove through its position. "Your dash cam," I said. Check your dash cam. It must have recorded something." He leaned into his vehicle, checked the camera's display, and went very still. After a moment, he beckoned me over. "Look at this." I walked to his car and looked at the screen. He was scrolling through the footage, showing the approach to my location, the road ahead clearly visible in the infrared illumination of his camera system. Then, at the exact moment he would have driven through the sphere's position, the footage went white. Not blank, not black, but completely white, like someone had shone an impossibly bright light directly into the camera lens. The white screen lasted for exactly 7 seconds. Then normal footage resumed, showing the road ahead and my vehicle on the shoulder. 7 seconds of overexposed footage, Officer Renshaw said quietly. The camera's automatic exposure should have compensated immediately, but it didn't. For 7 seconds, something overwhelmed the sensor completely. So it is there. Something is there. Something that I can't see, that thermal imaging doesn't detect, that allows physical objects to pass through it, but that visible light cameras record as overwhelmingly bright. He closed the laptop, his jaw tight. Yes, something is there. We both looked back at the sphere, still orange from my perspective, still hovering, still absolutely silent. "Has this happened before?" I asked again. He was quiet for a long moment, then, "Get in your car. Follow me to the station. I'll tell you everything there." The drive to the Torrey substation took 15 minutes. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting the orange sphere to be following us, but the road behind remained dark and empty. The substation was a small building, more like a house than an official facility. Officer Renshaw parked in front and I pulled in beside him. He led me inside to a small office with a desk, filing cabinets, and a wall covered in maps of the region. "Coffee?" he offered. "Please." He made 2 cups from a machine that looked like it had been serving highway patrol officers for decades. The coffee tasted like it too, but it was hot and caffeinated and I needed both. 16 months ago, he said, sitting down across from me. I responded to a call about a stranded motorist on Highway 24, about 5 miles from where you were tonight. Woman from Colorado said her car had died and she couldn't restart it. When I arrived, her vehicle was fine, started right up, no problems. Okay. But she was shaken, really shaken. Said she'd been driving when a light appeared in the road ahead of her. She described it as orange, hovering, silent. She tried to brake, but her car wouldn't respond. She passed right through the light and her engine died immediately after. The similarity to what I'd witnessed was obvious. Did you believe her? I wrote it up as a possible electrical failure, environmental factors, but I didn't forget it. Then, 2 months later, another call. Different location, same highway. This time, a truck driver reported seeing a sphere of light in the road. Said it didn't show up in his headlights, but he could see it clearly. How many reports have there been? Officially, 3. Unofficially, counting conversations I've had with other officers and locals who don't want to file formal reports, at least 15. All within a 20-mile stretch of Highway 24, all describing similar phenomena. Orange light, sometimes other colors, always silent, always allowing vehicles to pass through. Why aren't you investigating this officially? He gave me a look that said I should know better. Because the moment you report something like this, you become that officer, the one who believes in UFOs, who wastes department resources chasing lights in the desert. Your credibility is gone, your career is compromised. So you've been documenting it quietly, gathering evidence without making it official. Exactly. And tonight, you gave me something I haven't had before. Clear photographic evidence from a witness whose credibility is unimpeachable. You're a professional photographer with no history of false reports, No reason to fabricate something like this. He pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. Inside were printed photographs, witness statements, his own handwritten notes, a personal investigation spanning 16 months, all done on his own time, all kept quiet. "These are all from the Highway 24 corridor?" I asked, looking through the documents. "All within this region, between mile markers 40 and 60, roughly. The sightings cluster around Capitol Reef National Park, particularly near the petroglyphs at the Fremont culture sites. Something about that caught my attention. Near the petroglyphs. Within 2 miles of any major petroglyph site, we have a higher concentration of reports. Could be coincidence, could be that those areas get more visitors and therefore more potential witnesses. Or it could be something else. What do you think it is?" He was quiet, considering his words carefully. "I think something has been happening in this region for a very long time. Long enough that ancient peoples noticed it and tried to document it the only way they knew how, by carving images into stone. And it's still happening, still appearing to people who happen to be in the right place at the right time. Or wrong place, wrong time. Maybe. But none of the witnesses report being harmed. Frightened, yes. Confused, absolutely. But not hurt. Whatever these lights are, they don't seem hostile." I thought about the sphere in the road, the way it had just existed there, passive and present. He was right. There had been nothing threatening about it. Unsettling, yes. Impossible, definitely. But not dangerous. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Your photos, first. High-resolution copies, unedited, with all metadata intact. Your testimony, in writing, describing exactly what you saw and when. And if you're willing, I'd like you to go back out there with me tonight. See if it appears again, documented more thoroughly." "You want to go back, right now?" The sphere was still there when we left. If it follows the pattern of other sightings, it could remain visible for hours. This might be our best opportunity to study it properly. I should have said no, should have gone back to my motel room, processed my photos, tried to rationalize what I'd seen. But I'd spent 9 years photographing the night sky, chasing rare astronomical events, documenting things most people never got to see. This was the same impulse. The need to witness, to document, to understand. "Okay," I said, "let's go back." We took Officer Renshaw's patrol car this time, with my camera equipment secured in the back. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the road ahead through the windshield, wondering if we'd see the orange glow before we reached my original location. "When you look at it," Renshaw asked as he drove, "what exactly do you see? Describe it in as much detail as possible." "A sphere of light, maybe 3 feet in diameter. The color is orange, but not bright orange. More amber, almost warm. It hovers about 3 feet off the pavement, perfectly centered in the road. It doesn't move, doesn't pulse or flicker. And here's the strange part. It doesn't cast light the way normal light sources do. The ground beneath it isn't illuminated. There are no shadows, no visible beam or glow extending beyond the sphere itself. Like it's not actually emitting light. Or like the light is contained somehow. Like looking at a glowing object through a perfectly clear window that doesn't let any light through. That's impossible. Everything about this is impossible." We drove in silence for a moment. Then Renshaw said, "I need to tell you something. The reason I believe you, the reason I'm taking this seriously, is because I've seen it too. You said you couldn't see the sphere tonight. I can't now. But 3 months ago, I could. I was doing a routine patrol early morning, around 4 a.m. I saw an orange light in the road ahead, exactly like you described. I thought it was a road flare at first. Emergency situation. I slowed down, approached it, and realized it wasn't a flare, it was something else entirely. What happened? I stopped my car about 50 feet away and got out to investigate. The light stayed there, hovering, silent. I tried shining my flashlight at it, nothing. Tried radioing dispatch, my radio was dead. Tried my cell phone, no signal. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, just watching it, trying to figure out what I was looking at. Then what? It blinked out. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. No fade, no movement, just instantaneous disappearance. And the moment it vanished, my radio came back online. My phone had signal again, like it had been blocking electromagnetic signals while it was present. Did you report it? I wrote it up as unusual light phenomenon, probable natural causes. Filed it and tried to forget about it. But then more reports started coming in, people describing the same thing I'd seen. I realized I couldn't ignore it anymore. We were approaching the location where I'd been photographing. Renshaw slowed the patrol car, scanning the road ahead. The sphere was gone. The highway stretched empty in both directions, just gray pavement under starlight. "It's not here," I said, disappointed but not surprised. "Let's go to your original position. Set up your equipment exactly as you had it before. Maybe it will reappear." He parked in the same pullout where I'd been earlier, and I unloaded my camera gear. Set up my tripod in the exact spot, oriented toward the same section of highway where the sphere had hovered. The night was quiet again, that normal desert silence without the heavy oppressive quality I'd felt before. The wind had picked up slightly, carrying the scent of sage and juniper from the surrounding hills. I took test shots while Renshaw set up additional equipment. A digital voice recorder, a compass to monitor any magnetic anomalies, a temperature sensor. He was treating this like a serious investigation, gathering baseline data. "Anything?" he asked after I'd been shooting for 15 minutes. "Nothing unusual, just normal stars, normal road, no orange glow. Maybe it won't come back tonight. These sightings don't seem to follow a predictable pattern. Sometimes the lights appear multiple times in one night. Sometimes weeks go between incidents." I kept shooting anyway, long exposures of the Milky Way, the same work I'd come out here to do originally. Renshaw monitored his sensors, checking temperature and electromagnetic readings every few minutes. Around 1:30 a.m., the temperature dropped. Not gradually, but suddenly. I felt it through my jacket, a chill that made me shiver. "Did you feel that?" I asked. Renshaw was already looking at his sensor. Temperature just dropped 8 degrees in under a minute. That's not a normal weather change. The wind stopped completely. The sagebrush that had been rustling quietly went still. Even the distant sound of the highway, that constant low hum of pavement under tires from vehicles miles away, seemed to fade, and the orange sphere reappeared. Same location, same amber glow, same impossible presence in the middle of the highway. I saw it clearly, and this time I was ready. I started shooting immediately, fast bursts of images, different exposures, different focal lengths. "Is it back?" Renshaw asked, watching me work. "Yes, same spot as before. Are you seeing it?" He looked directly at where I was pointing and shook his head. "I see empty road. Check your instruments." He glanced at his sensors. Electromagnetic field strength just increased by 40%, temperature continuing to drop, now down 12 degrees from baseline. And the compass needle is spinning. Spinning? Rotating slowly, counterclockwise, like there's a shifting magnetic field affecting it. I kept photographing while Renshaw documented the sensor readings. We were capturing different aspects of the same phenomenon, me recording it visually, him recording its measurable physical effects. "I'm going to try something," I said. "I'm going to walk toward it. That might not be safe." You walked toward it before. You said nothing happened. I also said my radio stopped working and I lost phone signal. We should maintain communication capability. Then come with me. We'll approach it together. We walked slowly toward the sphere, Renshaw carrying his sensors, me holding my camera. As we got closer, the temperature dropped further. By the time we were 50 feet away, I could see my breath. The sphere was larger than I'd thought. Up close, it had to be at least 5 feet in diameter, and the detail was incredible. The surface wasn't smooth or uniform. It had texture, almost like looking at the surface of the sun, with darker regions and brighter areas, all flowing and moving in slow patterns. I'm at the position where the sphere should be, Renshaw said, standing directly in front of where I saw it. Temperature here is 18 degrees below baseline. Electromagnetic readings are off the scale. My compass is useless. You're standing right in front of it. From my perspective, you're inches away from its surface. What would happen if I reached out? If I tried to touch where you're seeing it? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Or maybe something very bad. He reached out slowly, his hand moving toward the sphere's surface. I watched through my camera's viewfinder, shooting continuously, documenting every moment. His hand passed through the space where the sphere existed from my perspective. No resistance, no reaction, nothing. Like reaching through empty air. But on my camera's screen, I could see something different. The sphere's surface rippled where his hand penetrated it, like dropping a stone into still water. Waves of distortion spreading outward from the point of contact, the amber glow fluctuating in brightness. It's reacting, I said. The surface is rippling. You're affecting it somehow. I don't feel anything, just very cold air. Pull your hand back slowly. He withdrew his hand, and I watched the ripples settle, the sphere returning to its previous state. The temperature began to rise immediately, climbing back toward normal. It's fading, I said, seeing the glow diminish. The sphere is getting dimmer. Within 30 seconds, it was gone. Just disappeared, leaving empty highway and slowly warming air. Renshaw checked his sensors. Temperature returning to ambient, electromagnetic field back to baseline, compass stabilizing. He looked at me. Did you get photos of the ripple effect? Everything. I shot the entire sequence. We walked back to the patrol car, both of us processing what had just happened. I'd documented a phenomenon that appeared to exist in 2 different states simultaneously, invisible and undetectable to one observer, clearly visible and reactive to another. This is bigger than just lights in the road, Renshaw said, looking at his notes. The electromagnetic effects, the temperature changes, the way it responds to physical interaction even when that interaction doesn't encounter physical resistance. This is something that exists in a way we don't fully understand. Maybe it exists partially in our reality and partially somewhere else. That would explain why you can't see it, but can measure its effects. Your sensors are detecting its influence on our environment even though the source is elsewhere. Parallel dimension, alternate reality, different plane of existence. Whatever terminology you want to use, you're suggesting something that's supposed to be science fiction. Science fiction until it's document science. We have data now. Multiple sensors confirming physical effects, photographic evidence, witness testimony. That's how unknown phenomena become accepted reality. Back at the substation, we spent 2 hours downloading and organizing the data. My photos showed the sphere in clear detail, including the ripple effect when Renshaw had reached through it. His sensor logs showed precise timestamps of the temperature drops and electromagnetic fluctuations, perfectly correlated with my photographic timeline. What do we do with this? I asked. You said reporting it officially would damage your career. It would. But we have enough evidence now that it can't be easily dismissed. The sensor data is objective, verifiable. Your photos show consistency across multiple images, and we have documented correlation between visual observation and measurable physical effects. So you're going to report it. I'm going to submit it to the State Department of Public Safety with a request for specialized investigation. Let them decide how to handle it. If they dismiss it, at least I tried. If they investigate, maybe we'll finally get some answers. I sent him copies of all my photos, along with a written statement describing everything I'd observed. He filed it with his sensor logs and his own report, creating a comprehensive documentation package. "One more thing," he said as I was preparing to leave. "If this goes public, if the department decides to investigate and word gets out, you need to be prepared for attention. Media interest, skeptics, believers, all of it. I've dealt with attention before. Published photos that people said were faked or impossible. I'm used to defending my work. This is different. This challenges fundamental assumptions about reality. People react strongly when their worldview is threatened. Let them react. I know what I saw, and I know these photos are real. That's enough." I drove back to my motel as dawn was breaking, the sky turning from black to deep blue to gold. I needed sleep before I could even begin processing what had happened. But first, I uploaded my photos to my backup drive and sent copies to trusted colleagues. If something happened to my data, I wanted to ensure the evidence survived. I woke up 12 hours later to dozens of messages. Renshaw's official report had gone up the chain of command, and someone had leaked it. Media outlets were running stories about mysterious lights on Highway 24. The attention was overwhelming. Interview requests from news networks, documentary producers, and university researchers flooded in. Everyone wanted my photos, my story. Other witnesses started coming forward. People who'd seen similar lights on Highway 24 over the years who'd kept quiet because they didn't want to be ridiculed. A research team from the University of Utah set up monitoring equipment along the highway corridor. For 3 months they documented the region, recording 17 separate events showing similar characteristics: temperature drops, electromagnetic fluctuations, visual phenomena visible to some observers but not others. I still photograph the night sky, still sell prints and run workshops. But now I also consult with research teams studying anomalous phenomena, providing photographic documentation of things that exist at the edges of understood reality. And sometimes, late at night when I'm out shooting in the canyon country, I see them again. The orange spheres, the amber glows, the lights that shouldn't exist. I photograph them, document them, add them to the growing archive of evidence that our reality is stranger and more complex than we imagined. Officer Renshaw continued his work with the Highway Patrol, but now his investigations of unusual phenomena are official, supported by his department. He's become the lead investigator for anomalous events in the region, working with scientists and researchers to understand what's happening in the Utah Canyon country. We stay in touch, comparing notes when new sightings occur, sharing data and observations. The mystery hasn't been solved. If anything, the more we learn, the more questions emerge. But we're asking the right questions now. We're documenting carefully, investigating seriously, treating these phenomena as genuine unknowns rather than dismissing them as impossible. The orange sphere still appears on Highway 24, less frequently now that monitoring equipment is present, like it's shy of too much attention. But it comes back, hovering silently in the middle of the road, existing in its impossible way. And we keep watching, keep photographing, keep gathering evidence of something that challenges everything we thought we knew about light and space and reality. The road between Torrey and Capitol Reef holds secrets. Some of them glow orange in the darkness, silent and strange and absolutely real. I've seen them, I've photographed them, and I know they're there, whether the rest of the world is ready to accept it or not. The truth doesn't need belief to exist. It just needs witnesses willing to look.